she at?
When did you know Curly?
Where is she at? Is she here? Alden.
You know her name?
Yeah. Oh, you are too, no?
Oh, yeah.
Out there by Buchanan, right? Ken Buchanan works for the fire department.
Oh, gotcha.
He's back out there. Yeah.
Cute.
Not bad.
Yeah.
The second Monday of the week. We're doing okay.
Yeah. I actually woke up yesterday. I actually woke up
Oh,
yesterday.
Well, I actually made the deposit to the bank.
Oh, good.
Then we ended up spending the rest of the day having.
Oh, okay, the bank.
The bank was closed.
Yeah, it's closed.
So my deposit's laying on my front seat. It's all ready for today. Dated yesterday.
Oh, really?
Okay. No,
Did you catch something?
And Jamie can tell you, it's not very often.
Gave it to me. It was a good coffee.
no Andy coffee. You say you're Alberti good coffee.
Anybody call Annie? Jack, did you call Annie?
No, you didn't tell me to. Okay.
Why did he tell you to call Corey?
Toby McMain's out there. Call Andy Lee. What?
He didn't tell you to call Corey and you called him.
Well, that's because this is what we do for each other. We call each other and say, hey, we got a meeting tonight, right? We do?
What? Meeting? It's 9 in the morning.
They'll grow up someday and make their own schedule.
Oh, listen to the.
Great, and I'm in the middle of it.
Are you okay?
You picked your seat.
Soon as he's done calling me.
Hey Jack, what do you tell your phone when you call me?
So what?
What do you tell your phone when you call me?
I can't say that.
Oh, I know.
There's a public meeting.
I'll say it. No. Call Dum Dum.
Oh, that's nice.
That would be the nice version.
That's nice, yeah, I'm sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'd probably answer.
Oh my goodness. Oh, he's like that.
Okay, Mayor.
Okay, we ready? Good morning.
Good morning.
We're gonna have fun today?
Of course.
Tons.
If we aren't having fun, we just won't do it.
That's right. We got a big agenda today. If you've looked at it both sides, we got a lot of information, a lot of important subjects. This will drive our future direction that we're going in, plus our budget. We're working our way up toward the budget and working with Joe. So we are gonna be out here by 1:30, if not sooner. That's the latest date. I'm walking out the door at 1:30 for sure. And we will move it to right before the next council meeting. If we don't finish. Okay? All right, thank you. We'll finish. So I'm supposed to do open remarks and an icebreaker. I guess that broke the ice. So
It melted it.
it melted. Consideration and possible discussion regarding off-site signage. Mr. Cook.
Didn't get this.
Okay.
You weren't here.
So about a month ago, we had a couple issues come up with members of the business community not being able to put up signage on 89 because their businesses were off the highway. The council directed me to put together some ideas for off-site signage that might accommodate these types of businesses that don't have direct frontage. So I put together a list of 11 points that I think should be addressed in an off-site signage ordinance, if the town council wants to go ahead with it. I will say though that off-site signage, an ordinance of this sort would be unprecedented, and I can't seem to find any other town or community that has off-site signage or any allowance for off-site signage to this degree. So this would be kind of setting the precedent in the state. With that said, I've put together 11 bullet points. It's up there as well. I have a few extra copies. Does Corey need one?
I give him mine.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
looking over Jack's shoulder.
So the one you gave me has 10.
Oh yeah, I added the changes that you talked to me about.
Thank you.
One of the issues with this is you're basically allowing for one property owner to put their, I guess, sign or whatever on somebody else's property. And so we have to, if we're going to draft this, it has to be something that provides for an ending point so that the property owner granting the sign on their property can cut it off at some point. With the option to renew. So I'll just go through the 11 points, and then in a further discussion with Cecilia, there'll probably be a 12th point that we talked about. The first point was businesses or the closest property boundary on which they are located shall be no further than a quarter mile from SR 89. And then public and institutional uses may request additional distance to the above stated quarter mile through a conditional use permit. This would allow other uses besides businesses that are located off the highway, such as a church or whatever, to request an off-site signage. The business owner shall obtain permission from an owner of commercial property fronting on SR 89 and a lease of land for a newly constructed sign or signed statement allowing the business located off-site to add their business nameplate to an existing freestanding or monument sign. We might want to include in there something about co-location, where if there's the possibility to co-locate on an existing sign, that way we don't get a proliferation of new signs up and down 89. Number 3 was permission from the owner of commercial property shall include a specific time limit or expiration date for the off-site signage. After such time, the permission shall either be renewed or the sign removed. Number 4, off-site signage shall require a sign permit and the owner's signature. So the owner of the property on 89, their signature shall be required on the application. Because it's going on their property, they need to.
You might add in there owner of the property, so we know which owner you're talking about.
Okay, clarify which owner.
Is this gonna have enough teeth if we have a change of owners? Somebody sells the business in the front, or is this gonna still stand?
That would be something I'd have to talk to Andrew about. I would think if there's a change of owner, then the permission would go away because that owner.
And you need to put that in.
Yeah, okay.
I would think that they would still actually have to honor that agreement for that period of time though. Okay, and you can't sell a piece of property and kick a renter out. You know, they still.
That's true.
It wouldn't be fair to the person in the back that set up his business and then
Yeah.
the guy sells the
Right.
property 2 weeks later and then,
How
Well,
do we
maybe
regulate
it'll be an
that?
encumbrance on the deed or something.
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I'll talk to Andrew about that. Okay. Number 5, off-site signage shall conform to all other aspects of the permanent signage as defined in section 1.21. So, height requirements, total square footage of signage, things like that.
Square footage of signage, does that go against that property owner, or is it an additional, does that front square footage be part of the business in the back's square footage?
That's a good question, and we can, however you want to word it. If you want it to count against if it counts against the property that already has signage, they're not gonna wanna do it.
Right.
So, if we want this to work, it would probably have to be new additional signage.
I agree.
I would think go against the rear business,
But not
his
the
total
89.
signage. So if he wants to go a little bigger up front, well, it's gonna take away from his sign in the back. He can,
Yeah. I can word it that way.
Well, a question on that, since you bring it up, why would you do that? I mean, I understand that in front of a business, we're only allowed X amount of square footage for our sign. But it seems kind of, counterproductive or whatever to not allow that person to have the same size sign at their actual business and still have frontage out here. They don't compete with each other, they don't, you know what I'm saying? I'd hate to have a person have their off-site signage. They have to have a big enough sign so that people can see that and know that they're off-site. And then they can only put a 1 foot square sign at their actual business saying who they are.
If they
So
used
I would,
99%
I would like to
up
see,
front.
I think I would like to see or recommend that the off-site signage is a whole different animal. And maybe say that their off-site signage, the size of it, does have to pertain to the size of their business, but they can have both, rather than
That would
one or the other.
double their allowed square footage,
Yes.
though.
So you're almost at an advantage being off the highway.
Then would you have to go to our other
But our-
ordinance that talks about signage, change that to say, except when you have off-site signage? Now
Well,
you're gonna
but-
affect other ordinances.
But they might
I'm
need the
looking at, I'm
signage
looking
too.
at the unfair advantage, or the unfairness of it is the fact that they're off the highway. And so they need to have something out on the highway to let people know that they even exist, but then they still need to have a sign at their business, so when people get there, they know that they're there.
Yeah.
So, just a thought.
Yeah, the unfairness side, there's a reason why people buy frontage property. And that's, so there is a little bit of, I think, ownership to the businesses that are going to rent or purchase off-site. There is a little bit of, stacking the deck against yourself, if you would, by purchasing off-highway or
Right.
renting off-highway.
There's different types of signage too, and each one has a square foot allowance. So you have your wall sign, which is allowed to go on the building. And then you have your freestanding sign, and you have your monument signage. So, I mean, there's multiple types of signage that people can incorporate off the highway. And if we're stating that the freestanding signage is taken up, then there's still allowed signage on
On their Walmart.
Right.
Mount. Okay.
Josh, what if the business in front of you won't allow you to put a sign up?
Well, point 11 I added here is that the town shall provide no legal advice, direction, or act as a negotiator. So if you can't get a property owner to give you permission to put a lease up, then that's not on the town. Nor do I think it's our responsibility to negotiate that.
I agree with that, but do they have any option as far as the guy next door or anything like that?
Well, the distance here is 1/4 mile, so I mean, if you wanna measure the 1/4 mile
Okay.
up and down a little bit,
Is there a limit to how many off-site signs someone with frontage can put up?
well, right now there is a limit because we prohibit all off-site signage.
Well, yeah,
But-
but I'm saying, they were talking about limiting the person that's off the highway, but the person that's on the highway, what if there's 5 businesses behind them that all want signs? Are you gonna be able to allow all those signs, and would it block the highway, kinda?
Well, that goes along with my original comment about co-locating, so the original person that puts up the sign we would probably require additional sign faces so that they could just co-locate.
Okay.
That keeps the over
They'd
proliferation.
all have to be on the same sign.
Okay.
That's the policy.
That way your driveways would stay clear and everything.
But if you look like at Frontier Village and all them, they have a
No.
big sign out front and it's got everybody
Okay.
that's in there. So, I don't know. Is the easement for the roadway, is that an option if somebody's being,
Well, the problem with the easement is it's still private property owned by,
oh, okay.
Unless everybody agrees.
it's not an action, it's a street, but it's not public right of way, even though it's for public access.
I was just trying to get around, think of a way if we could put the sign in that right of way. That would, even if the front property owner didn't want them, that we could put it in there.
It's still owned by
The front property owner
Yeah.
property, gotcha. Cause it's an easement on it,
Mm-hmm.
Not a
right.
dedicated street.
Right.
I don't know, it's gonna be a tough one.
So just going through the last of the points, offsites, let's see, offsite signage shall not be allowed on vacant property. The business requesting offsite signage shall be required to have a permanent sign on site prior to approval of any offsite signage. No temporary or auxiliary offsite signage shall be permitted. Such signage shall only be allowed on the property on which the business is located. That way we don't get over proliferation of flags and feathers and banners. All offsite signage shall comply with the outdoor lighting ordinance. Signage, when constructed, shall meet minimum required setbacks and is prohibited from being located in the public right-of-way. And the town shall not provide legal advice, direction, or act as a negotiator between property owners. So those are kind of my thoughts and my points.
I'm gonna ask one of our participants back here that has signs or is interested in signs to tell us what their opinion is.
Well, you're talking about people buying the property up front. This is exactly what happened to me. I was 8 years with that signpost right down at my shop. He bought it and I had one put in and he took it down. Easement was what I was thinking at one time. Thought, gosh, that's not gonna happen. At this point right now, I really don't care what we do as long as I can get a sign out there. I'm paying marketing companies, everything else, they're driving right on by and going to the next business because they can't find it. Better find a different building, but Alvarez has told me multiple times, put a sign out here with mine, whatever. So the finding another property owner up front is a good idea if they're willing to do it. There again, just like with Squareway Enterprises, they decided they wanted to charge me $300 to $500 a month to have my sign on there. I think that should be illegal, you know, especially since how when they took occupancy of that building, mine mysteriously blew out after 5 years of being in there. And then they painted it up and decided they was gonna put signs in. So you're gonna have issues either way with property owners. That's been my experience already. Or the fact that the owners of the property that you're on have no authority to help you do anything up front. So these are good ideas. They don't help me exactly at this point, but change it would help other people, I guess.
The one that I don't understand is number 6. Shall not be allowed on vacant property.
Yep.
If the property
It
is
goes-
still owned by somebody,
That's true, but
Is
it goes
there-
back to a primary accessory uses. If there's no primary use on the property, why are we gonna allow a sign to be put up on a vacant piece of property?
you know, I'm thinking, because I have a visual of his property.
Yeah.
You know, Alvarez is not doing anything up on that front portion, you know.
Yeah, he technically could have, Alvarez could technically have his own sign up there. And he could build in spaces for other property owners to put their signs there with the off-site signage
This
permission.
is the quarter-mile rule.
But you're saying
right
by-
behind Alvarez?
I'm right next door to Alvarez.
Right, oh, you're right.
Just
next door.
south.
Behind
South,
Square
Yeah,
Way.
south side of him.
Another case is the church, is it 1 South? That the church is kind of off the road a little bit, and they've always wanted a
The
sign on the
Methodist
highway.
Church.
Methodist Church.
That's one south.
And a barber shop and several other places.
Uh-huh.
But there's a vacant lot on the south
I
side
don't
of
know where
1
the
South.
barber shop is,
Okay.
within 1/4 mile or not.
They've always wanted a sign.
That'd be close,
Be close.
yeah.
But just, Josh, you're thinking, once a sign goes on a vacant piece of property, it's now declaring that property a
Well, there's,
something?
the property has no primary use, so we wouldn't allow a parking lot on a vacant property because the use that goes on that property has to be accessory to, anything that goes on the property has to either be accessory to or a primary use, and a sign is where
And
does
I
that-
guess I'm also thinking
Yeah.
if that property is vacant, then it's not obstructing the view looking back down that street
Right.
anyway. Okay.
Any more questions about this?
Okay, I'll work with, Andrew finalizing the questions that were brought up, and then I'll get this on the planning commission and then, the council meeting.
Okay, very good, thank you.
I have one more question. Number one, public and institutional, why is it restricted to that? And what was
Well,
the?
we're not supposed to, regulate by content. And so, this was originally brought forward for businesses,
Mhm.
but then that would exclude non-businesses, like churches.
Oh, so I misunderstood. I guess I thought it was just the additional distance to the above stated quarter mile. Well, that's what it says. Would be for a conditional use permit, but only for public or institutional uses, not for private business.
Yeah, so businesses within a quarter mile, but if there's public institutional, then, and they're further than that, then they could request a conditional use permit to allow them to go.
Okay, and so that was my question was, why is it restricted to just them? Why couldn't a commercial business do the same thing? What was your purpose for wording it that way? And,
Well, I think there are more churches that are further than a quarter mile than businesses, which is why I include that. But, I mean, I can include that anyone that's further than a quarter mile can go.
yeah, I was just wondering why
Well,
the restriction, that's all.
So we have the Grand Canyon signage package that's coming out, and that's addressing restaurants and what other types? Tourist type
food,
things, so like
gas,
Granite Creek,
attraction.
vineyards, food. Public institutions would cover people like Yavapai College that had to go under the wayfinding, but we didn't adopt the wayfinding. Churches. So there is an option, I guess, for some as far as getting the Grand Canyon signage. That's what, $40 a month after you sign up. So people like Gary, but you know, think about it at the industrial park. If everybody, let's say there's 50 businesses there and they all do off-site signage on the highway now because they can. I mean, it's gonna be a mess. So I think that's why we kinda came up with, it has to be a certain distance at least to try and not make the highway just a whole bunch of signs and.
Well, and then I think the one thing that isn't in here also is that, how many? I mean, you're talking about, you'd have a main sign, so let's say Alvarez then puts his sign out there, and then this gentleman here wants to put a sign on there, and next thing you know, you've got 20 businesses back there. How large, you know, what, are we gonna have a limit to what you can really end up with on a piece of property for off-site signage?
That's a good question.
Because, I mean, it could get pretty big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could.
And I don't know how you do that and be fair about it. You know, if there's businesses back there, they still want, some, to get their message across, so.
Well, if we subtract the amount of signage of their freestanding sign that they can put on their property and allow them to, I guess, transfer that right to 89,
Then we shouldn't get too out of hand.
I
So-
don't think so.
Okay.
I agree. Well, like, I just go back to my statement, like, in there, what's that mall the Indians have where Walmart used to be?
Frontier Village.
Thank you, Frontier Village. You know, they got that one sign up front, and it's got everybody listed on it
Yeah.
that wants to be there.
Yeah, but that's one property owner that leases, so
Yeah, it's a
I think,
single
it takes cooperation, and I don't know that you're always gonna get that.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm just saying maybe,
And that's on the Indian reservation, which we have no control
well, it's the same at Ponderosa too.
I mean, it's in their best interest to try and do that, but
over. Yeah.
Or would this just apply then to easements and not streets?
What
Did
do
you
you
not
mean?
doing it to put a sign up on the front corner of an intersection? As in, we'll use that church scenario. They have their own frontage street. Where easements are now where people have businesses in depth.
So instead
Or
of
am I
just,
getting too,
I mean, we can draft it so that it only applies to those properties that are affected by an easement, separated from the 89 by an easement, but that won't address other businesses, like, when Burger King finishes and then they split their property, there's gonna be a property that's gonna be served in the back, but won't have any frontage on 89. So,
But it would have an easement to it.
no, it'll
Just-
have, right of way off, it'll have direct access onto, Road 2 North. If I remember correctly.
And if you go with what you're talking about, where it's just an easement, then we really are not taking care of one of the businesses that actually started this, and that was the Norte back there. You know, that's really how a lot of this came about, that we
Yeah.
started talking about it, was he lost his, you know, off-site signage also, and now is saying, what do I do? So,
Okay, we're gonna have to wind this
It's a
up
good
and move
start.
on.
Okay.
okay.
Right. Let's move on to item 4, consideration discussion regarding the town's water future. Mr. Holmes, water resource consultant.
You wanna get your mouse?
Oh, sure, thank you.
You got 5 minutes.
Whoa.
Well, this is the meat of the discussion. I'm sorry that Councilmember Perkins can't be here because she really wanted to talk about the water stuff, so.
Did you get your?
I did, thank you.
You snooze, you lose.
Well, she's had a family thing come up, so.
I don't think so. I think this will be good. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So this presentation, I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of go back, take a step back and talk about the general plan and some of its water vision. There's many topics that were expressed in the general plan. And then kind of moving with some of the key concept about what is sustainable water use, what does that really mean, and then about smart growth, what is smart growth, and how does that relate to water. So I thought I'd talk about those topics, and then quickly talk about the pros and cons of public versus private water service. And then I'm going to throw questions at all the council that are here, and hope to hear from everybody. We can take some notes, but I'm going to pose some questions, various questions as to what your thoughts are, looking to the future. Priorities, challenges, opportunities, so it's kind of addressing some of those aspects. So, just quickly, general plan, the vision of the town again is the town of Chino Valley is a community looking to its future that envisions diverse business and employment expansion, varieties in housing, and options in transportation, all while maintaining its valued farming heritage, recreation, and environmental assets, and its small town image. And of course, at the same time, you are growing. So just looking at your population trends, you see that from 2010 through 2016, things were just kind of slowly, and in the last few years, you see there's been kind of an influx into rapid growth. So kind of preparing this conversation that there's a lot of growth, and the future could see a lot more opportunities and growth. The general plan also talks about your greatest assets, small town lifestyle, scenery, open space, air quality, water quality. Your greatest concerns, lack of employment, business opportunities, water resources, neighborhood upkeep, and road improvements, which obviously is the transportation conversation. Your opportunities needed. So it's business expansion, job varieties, which we'll touch on some of those. Business park employment, neighborhood shops, cafes, major retail stores, development, community cores. What are those? Those public places. And parks and trails. And lastly, health and medical care facilities. So in the general plan, the water resources vision, what is that? It's encourage sustainable water resources and protect water quality as the town grows. What does sustainable really mean? It's a very relative term, but just using the most accepted, widely accepted sustainable term, it's an integrated social, economic, and environmental components into all designated water uses, and that protect and restore water quality and water quantity. So kind of when you think of that, it's a three-legged stool. It's your social, economic, and environmental water uses. That's just what sustainability is, and it's both water quantity and water quality. And feel free to interrupt me at any time. So Chino Valley does have some pretty robust water rights today. Our water service area rights, we've touched on those at various, some of our discussions. There is no limit to how much water the town can serve. It can expand its infrastructure and serve non-subdivisions requiring a certificate of assured water supply all day long, forever and ever. It can grow and grow and grow. There's no limit to that, as long as it's not, we're serving, unless somebody provides water and has a certificate, but we can grow the utility to serve under our service area water rights, expand and continue to serve. These are the non-subdivision types of development,
Whether it's residential or commercial
or industrial.
or industrial, right?
It could be a big 40-acre, large distribution center. We can serve that. It's a non-subdivision type activity. Did you have?
Yeah, just to clarify, so the town could expand their lines to serve, even if the lines are more than 660 feet away?
Correct.
Okay.
We can expand lines that go all the way up to Sullivan Lake if you wanted to serve. Absolutely.
Because you just started talking.
The other aspect is, we talked about line extensions. You don't always have to have a very expensive, let's say, for example, there's a very desirable development that is going to build up at 4 North, and we don't have current water lines there, or it's 4 South. We can actually create a satellite water service area, which would be bringing on a new or existing water well with a reservoir, pump station, and have just a limited service area called a satellite service area. We'd use a temporary water right the town would own, and we could start serving until a certain number of customers would then be served by the town, and then our service area right would then be placed on top of that. And eventually, as the town's water service area grows, those 2 service areas will eventually meet and join. So it's another way to look at a very more cost-effective way of serving those remote areas of the community, should there be a desirable development that moves in. And lastly, the town currently has the ability to import water from the Big Chino. You have the only import permit issued by the state. You do own historically irrigated acres at the Wine Glass Ranch. So looking towards future water augmentation, the stage is set, so to speak, that someday, should the town be ready and willing, you have the ability to import water. And that's be a vital water supply that could be utilized within the active management area. Go ahead, we'll go back.
Yeah, that's the satellite water service areas. So once, you have to get permission from ADWR for your well,
Correct.
and from there you can expand your lines. What about how many? Same thing, same rule applies as far as service.
Correct. We initially, what you do is we have like the type 1 water right. It'd just be a mobile water right we bring down there to serve the initial number of customers until we get the requirement, and we then talk to the department and then bring down our satellite, our water service area right to that well or wells. And it's very standard. This happens all over different service areas. They have sprawl development, or they have a very important industrial complex that comes in. It happens to be far enough away they don't want to extend their infrastructure. It's very common practice. The state doesn't usually get in the way. It's fairly standard. And I just drew some circles up where it could be, 4 North or 4 South, where you could see some of those areas that begin to develop that could be created into satellite service areas, besides the current core service area that you have along primarily Road 2 North and just north and south of that.
And does it matter what about the other companies that are in town, if they have a service area defined by the Corporation Commission? Is there a conflict if it's within that or next to that service area?
No, they have, normally the private water utility have a CCNN, Certificate of Convenience and Necessity, where they define their boundary. Normally we'll expect them to serve within that. Some of them may still be undeveloped. They'll serve within that boundary. We may go adjacent to it and serve up to, and maybe someday if the town is ready and there's that kind of conversation, they may say, well, we want the town to take over our service area. We don't want to be in the private utility business. And that may happen. And if you have infrastructure there already, it just makes it more convenient. But you can go up to, and in fact, there are laws that govern how you can have overlapping service areas. Sometimes maybe the private would say, we don't want to serve this development within our CCNN, we want the town to go ahead and serve that area. And you may have parallel pipes in the ground. And that already occurs today in Chino Valley. You have City of Prescott and Town of Chino Valley water lines in the same street, serving opposite sides of the street. But they may request that you come in and serve part of their CCN. They would probably need to get some permission by the Arizona Corporation Commission. But we could go ahead and do that if so inclined, through an agreement or something along those, as a legal instrument.
And Prescott being a city, does that change their equation as far as their service areas?
The laws pretty much allow for, especially for municipal or those kind of public utilities, to have overlapping service areas. There's no laws prohibiting that. And we already have overlapping service areas.
Just wanted to clarify a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's muddy.
It's all muddy.
Except for the water that we provide.
That's right. Okay, just want to touch on some of the water resource goals that were defined in the general plan. Again, just a quick overview and recap. So, water resource goal number 1 is to encourage sustainable water resource management and protect water quality. This would be accomplished through what was identified in the general plan as streamline the subdivision regulations and expediency and flexibility. Ensure major and minor subdivisions water availability complies with ADWR assured water regulations. And adding procedures for the 5 or less lot developments for non-assured water supply service. So developing that kind of activity. And then encourage shared wells for parcel splits and compliance with state and county regulations. Water resource goal number 2 is expand indoor-outdoor water conservation and rain catchment through education to existing home and business owners and regulation methods for all new construction. And it was pointed out this will be achieved through distribute water conservation technique brochures. And you currently are doing some of that. They were, I'll say, regional brochures that were developed for the Upper Verde River Watershed Protection Coalition. They adopted the Water Smart logo and program that Prescott developed. Now it's a regional messaging. So you are achieving some of that, but there may be some specific Chino Valley education or information that is specific to Chino Valley that you may want to have. So there's more that could be done. Create incentives for replacement of lawns with xeriscape or drought-tolerant vegetation. Currently, I don't think you have an incentive program that would actually pay for removal of turf and then allow a homeowner to convert that into some sort of lower or no water use landscape. Create incentives for replacement of high water use toilets and shower heads with low flow fixtures in older homes, and discourage high water consuming businesses.
Mark,
Yes.
can we go back to the previous page? Just, you said something at the end that I wanted you to
This one or the
clarify.
one previous to that?
Before that. You said that to encourage shared water wells for lot splits.
Lot splits.
And so what is the advantage of that? What is the purpose?
So the advantage of that would be, for example, let's just say there's 5 lots. And if everybody had an exempt well, they decided they were going to go ahead with multiple, so 5 exempt wells are going to go in. The real winner of that, well, from a long-term well ownership and operation of that well, is whoever has the deepest well. And wells are expensive. So it's so much cost per linear foot of drilling that well, and then operation and the type of pump. If it's exempt well, it'd be 35 gallons per minute or less. But if somebody, maybe they didn't have the wherewithal to drill a deeper well at the time when they purchased that lot and put a home on it, and they had a shallower well, they could be impacted by those number of wells that are right there next to them. So having a shared well, it allows for that non-competition for that water supply. And in our water supply, the water levels are dropping. We're overdrafting the aquifer right now, and there is some variability in that. But overall, it's still dropping in some areas 2.5 feet a year. In other areas, it might be a little more dramatic. In some areas, less dramatic. But having a shared well could provide for, like I'll say a quasi HOA, where you have those 5 lots contributing the funds to operate, maintain the well. It could be a very deep well, single pump that's capable of providing water to all those pressure tanks for all those homeowners. There's no competition. The competition will be further away from those lots. So in the long run, they have more financial wherewithal to fix problems that may develop from that single well versus their own wells, or again, competing against each other for whoever has the deepest well will win in the long run. And then potentially the shallow well may become impacted.
But they're still taking the water out of a well and not returning it to the aquifer.
That's correct. They
No
would be
advantage
on,
to the town.
they could be on sewer, or most likely it would
If
be
it's
in,
on sewer, that is an advantage.
it is an advantage. But if they're on septic, you're absolutely correct. Septic is not providing substantial recharge back to the aquifer. But
So
that's-
that was, and the reason I asked the question was to find that out exactly. So you're talking, the advantage there is more of a monetary and safety value for those homeowners. It really isn't part of the conservation, because each home is still gonna use about the same amount of water.
Correct.
Okay,
There's no real savings from a groundwater usage standpoint. They're all gonna use what they're gonna use based on how their lots and so forth have been set up.
Right.
But it is from a consumer confidence standpoint, they probably have a more robust well because they've all financially contributed to that well.
Right.
And it provides security for your residents. I mean, that's just the way I would wanna, if I was in a multi-lot type of split, I'd wanna have a shared well. It's just financially better. And it's, you're working together with your neighbors versus opposing them. You
Are
say,
you gonna
sorry,
have
well
fist
and dry.
fights over the water?
Pardon?
Are you gonna have fist fights over the neighbor's water?
I hope not. We don't want to have that.
I've been
Hopefully
involved-
they're all
I've been-
sharing whiskey.
I've been involved in a lot of those, and it's very, very important to have a contract that
Yep.
stipulates exactly how everything works.
So I said a quasi HOA, and you may even have some things that are, if you've got really sophisticated lot splits, you'd have something that runs with the land that's required from the landowners in perpetuity. You're gonna pay X per year, this operates and maintains the well, so you're exactly right, you wanna have nothing left to chance. You'd all work together so that you're all contributing and not have a tragedy of the commons. It would be all success, yeah, absolutely.
So how does that work? Is it a domestic well, right?
It would be yes,
So it's 35 gallons a minute,
yep.
but you have 5 houses now.
Correct, and it could actually have a, don't forget, 35 gallons a minute pumped 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year is 56 acre feet. So that's a lot of water. 56 acre feet's a lot of water. If 5 households, we're looking at, typically, we look at, how many acre feet does it take to serve how many homes? Usually it's, maybe 3.5 if you're not as efficient per acre foot, or it's something different. But it's, if they can't, those 5 can't share on that 35 gallons, and it may have some storage tank. They may have requirements for that, so you're filling, the pump goes on less frequent to fill up, maybe it's a 5,000 or 10,000 gallon tank on site. That then pumps to their pressure tanks, and so the well is only working when it needs to fill that tank. The duty cycle is much less. Otherwise, it'd be kicking out a lot and a lot and a lot. Could burn up the pump. So.
Yeah, and just to let you know, when we design municipal systems, we design at 100 gallons per person per day. So if you have 3 people in your house, we're designing for 300 gallons a day. But he's talking that exempt well pumps 35 gallons a minute. So, in 10 minutes, you've got the water for a whole day's design, and those are conservative numbers, so.
Yeah, it's very doable. 5 homes can easily share a domestic exempt well. Absolutely. Okay, water resources, goal number 3 is promote the expansion of the town's municipal water distribution system and sewer collection system, and the expansion of the reclamation facility. And this would be accomplished through endorse and publicize the importance of the municipal utility expansion, protection of the water resources, and for the economic development aspects. Form and/or expand the citizens' committees to hold public education workshops and neighborhood coffees to promote understanding of the utility expansion. Why would we do that? And what's the benefit of that? And then produce pamphlets, diagrams, and tables that explain locations and potential economic benefits for the utility expansions. And explain financial benefits to all property owners in Chino Valley by the expansion of water and sewer systems along Highway 89 corridor. And then emphasize the infill development where water and sewer systems exist and are the starting point for the expansion. So obviously, that goal is to try and help educate those new landowners that are coming, our businesses, plug them into where we already have infrastructure, where we have existing lot availability. Water resource goal 4 is to increase future water resource augmentation for the town. And that's done through working cooperatively, identified in the general plan, on a regional basis in support of long-range importation of Big Chino water to the Tri-City area. But I would also say that you could probably add another one that wasn't spelled out in the general plan, that would be continue working on your existing town-specific water augmentation project and moving those forward, because we don't know when or even if that Tri-City aspect of that water importation will move forward. We just don't know. So you still have to think about, you already have things in motion that you can have success with potentially. So you got to continue on with some of the work you're already doing. Number 5 is encourage new residential development to install paved roads that are designed with proper construction materials and drainage features to control dust and erosion. And it's identified you accomplish that through upgrade regulations for road designs commensurate with projected traffic volumes. And I would also say that you could probably easily add in that in the general plan, examine new water and sewer infrastructure expansion projects with new roads. So as you think about putting in a new road, think about even if it's dry lines, both for water and sewer, you've got infrastructure going in when that road's tore up versus the future tearing up a road. So maybe road projects can be considered as, you're gonna do a new road, think about water and sewer at the same time you're gonna do the new road. So that's just food for thought. Examine new street designs that can provide stormwater for passive street landscapes and the residential, commercial, industrial development. So I kind of show a picture there of a great example of passive rainwater through the street design, curb gutter, and then you have it going into landscaped areas.
There's also water quality features.
Correct. We'll touch on that here. Number 6 is update regulations for paving driveways, parking areas, and stormwater requirements for business uses. This would be accomplished by adding green technology, such as permeable surfaces that help control dust, stormwater drainage, encourage bioretention stormwater areas to help with purification and infiltration of your stormwater back into the aquifer, and of course increase the recharge into the aquifer, and then decrease allowable slope percentages at standard retention ponds to allow for vegetation growth on the slopes versus that riprap, which leads to a lot of erosional issues and sand moving and so forth. There's a great example of a permeable parking area where the water is actually soaking into those permeable surfaces there on the brick or draining into landscaped areas. And lastly, I think it's last number 7 is to assess new developments for potential air and water impacts. This would be done through, obviously we want to encourage green business, so non-polluting businesses and discourage high water consuming businesses. I'm going to talk more about what is a high water consuming business. You may have I'll use a loose example, a chip manufacturer. They could use 1 million gallons a day, but if they gave 95% of that water back to the reclamation facility to be recharged back to the aquifer, that might be considered a very nominal or low water user versus a water bottling company who's going to take your water, bottle it, and that's embedded and shipped out of the region. So that would be considered a high water user. So there's some things we can talk about in the future. And just kind of a trivia, I like to always ask this question. It's one of my favorites. Why did you come and become incorporated? Why did the town of Chino Valley become incorporated? So I wanted to ask this. What's one of the top, there's several reasons, but what is one of the top reasons why a region becomes municipally incorporated? And I'd love to hear from you. Any ideas? It's either staff or
They're
council.
reading.
Control our own future.
I was reading the answer.
Significantly improve the
I'm not
entitlement
dumb.
of land to accomplish growth.
Tell your neighbors what
And it really comes down to this. It's, you are the experts at entitling land. You're helping landowners entitle their properties. But it's done in a way that obviously you want to accommodate growth or smart growth. And it's to improve the entitlement through the enhancements of more organized smart growth, and we'll talk about what is really smart growth. And it's in housing, transportation, recreation, resource management, economic prosperity, better social engagement, and environmental protection. So going back to that sustainability, you're hitting the social, economic, and environmental again. You are the champions of how this community will grow smarter than if you were not incorporated. If the county was here maintaining growth, and you've been in some of the county areas where it's kind of haphazard. And that's, the next one is the results of poorly entitled lands with growth. It leads to, in some cases, unaffordable homes, lost farms or ranches, traffic congestion, sprawl growth, and worsened environmental conditions.
Kind of like in the county. It's happening in some areas of the county.
Absolutely.
Mr. Valley.
What'd you say?
You said.
So I wanted to touch on, and smart growth is really, smart growth is about water, but it's also about, looking at your community. I'm going to give some examples, and I'm not suggesting that Chino Valley should look exactly like this today, just examples that I think are pretty clear cut as to what they're attempting with that. But this is the top 10 accepted examples of ideas of smart growth. I thought I'd go over those. There could be many more. There could be some dynamic ones based on your area. But number 1, mixed land uses. So you see in our general plan, and of course you've heard this, community cores, developing these community cores of these mixed land uses. And this puts residential, commercial, and recreation uses very close together, which some Chino Valley residents may oppose, but some may find to enjoy, having those amenities that are walkable. It allows for a more diverse population. It allows for walkable, bikeable community and more accessibility. It makes the area attractive and safe for residents versus getting in your car and having to drive to the store. You may be able to walk there. Builds communities around public spaces and reduces, again, pollution. You're all about, you point out in general plan, air pollution. Air quality is important. We have very wonderful air quality here in Chino Valley. Number 2 is compact building designs. From a water standpoint, very efficient. It makes also very efficient use of lands for buildings. It preserves more open space. You can create more open spaces, something I think that's very important for the community here. It reduces the needed resources for those developments, and it can reduce the footprint of new construction. Again, promotes rainwater filtering and recharge. This is kind of an example of just that. You have a lot of open space, and you have compact, some different diverse land uses here, but it's very compact. Number 3 is create a range of housing opportunities. So provide quality and affordable for people of all income levels. How do you do that? It's housing growth is critical to community growth and new construction and development. It's integrating single multifamily housing support and supporting more diverse population, utilizing different forms of housing and allowing for and accommodating increased densities without radically changing your landscape. So it's very tricky, but you can try and achieve this without changing Chino Valley's look. And there's ways to do that. And Joshua is probably more of an expert than I am, but there are ways to achieve that. Again, just some examples, just showing the different types, from townhouses, single family, apartment complexes, and so forth, multifamily
That'd mainly be through zoning type.
activities. Correct. Number 4 is creating walkable neighborhoods. Very important for smart growth. It's a walkable community is a desirable place to live, work, learn, and play, and a key towards smart growth. Walkable communities make pedestrian activity possible, especially for kids. They create streetscapes for a range of users, pedestrians, bicyclists, equestrian, and for Chino especially, and other forms of transit. And they ensure safe and inviting pedestrian corridors. That's an inviting place to live. If your kids especially can walk to school in a safety corridor, that's something I think is very desirable. Number 5 is community with a strong sense of place. So smart growth encourages communities to create a vision with development standards that respect your community's values. So don't lose those values, but promotes development that use natural and man-made boundaries for neighborhoods. Encourage the construction and preservation of buildings that are assets to the community quality. So don't lose your heritage. And community quality will retain their economic vitality over time. So by doing this, you're creating that economic vitality and the historic aspects of your community. Open space, again, very important to Chino Valley. These are natural areas that provide important community space, habitats for wildlife, recreation, farms or ranches, places of natural beauty and critical environmental assets. It removes developmental pressures from these areas, so no one's really going to be looking in these areas. You plan again where you have your core densities. Redirects new growth to develop in the right places, mitigates noise and air pollution, and protects surface and groundwater resources. You have natural areas that right next to the hills where you have water that's able to recharge in the grasslands there back in the aquifer versus impervious surfaces, shuttling that water to the nearest wash. Number 7 is strengthen and direct development towards planned growth areas. So kind of this example is they're redeveloping some of these old vacant lots or parking lots or taking down old buildings with new ones. So it's directing that growth towards some of these existing core development areas, and it provides a more cost-effective development, especially if you've got infrastructure there, and improves quality of life and improves your community tax base. So those are some ways, again, trying to really promote those activities. And it's providing a variety of transportation choices. So Smart Growth aims to provide people with more choices in housing, shopping, communities, and transportation, and providing that multimodal transportation. Here you see you've got a trolley line, you've got a bicycle path, a sidewalk. Obviously, this is a very wonderful example of a multimodal area within this community. So very walkable, very multimodal transportation to go to work, or go to the store, or just to go somewhere within the community. And the last 2 here are important because it's about making decisions. Again, it's in a public forum, but it's making these decisions that are predictable, fair, and cost-effective. So it's, only private capital markets can supply the capital needed to meet the growing demands for smart growth. The value of property and desirability of places are affected by government investment in infrastructure and your regulations. So where you put infrastructure and how you regulate development are your key factors of how this will be successful. Government that make the right infrastructure and regulatory decisions will support fair, predictable, and cost-effective smart growth. And you'll expediting the process. It's very important too, is keeping private dollars trapped in a very long development process is hurting that development. So it's trying to have an expeditionary type of process that's fast-tracked so those dollars can get released into the development and in the community. And lastly, it's as a transparent, you want to encourage the community and stakeholder collaboration throughout many aspects of the process, even these kinds of conversations. So it's creating a great place to live, work, and play if your community responds that way and provides the vital, important, innovative feedback that you want to hear and incorporating those ideas. So it can lead to really amazing understanding of where your community cores can be established, how they can look. That just, obviously, having the open meetings and engaging the community is very important. So continue doing those things, and that's the last one. And so I just want to talk about some really good successes that Chino Valley has made some huge steps forward, just so we're not always in the general plan, but there's been some really good activities. So what have you done so far? You've established a business park zoning at Old Home Manor. You've got things in motion for Old Home Manor and having your business park. That could become part of your core development. You've started the integration of the water master plan at Old Home Manor, and that will be coming to you on February 25th council meeting. So there are a number of things towards master plan that you're doing. New economic development and development services, key positions have been filled. So, you have managers and directors in those roles that are helping drive these conversations. Your sign package for municipal buildings has been completed, right?
They're not up yet, but yeah.
Been completed.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Not to interrupt. So Frank and I have met with Unisource, and underway is the gas line to Old Home Manor as well. So that's another success, I would say.
We're not
What is
done
it?
yet. There's more. There's more coming.
Gas
Oh.
lines at Old Home Manor.
Sorry,
Are there, I didn't hear you, she kinda,
I didn't know if that was on here or not.
what'd you say? Speak.
Frank and I have met with Unisource for the gas line to get to Old Home Manor as well. I didn't see it on here, but
Okay.
I don't
Oh,
know
it
if it
isn't
is.
on here?
It's not. That's a good point.
Thank you.
So you've got more infrastructure there that's not, that you control. Also, you have the rewrite of the UDO to a more user-friendly code is currently underway. So Joshua and his team are underway with that rewriting. You also have an agreement for business park improvements to make it a bit more business-friendly has been completed. You have a regionalization for the economic development in the Quad City area now. So you actually have economic development now coordinating Quad City area-wide, which is a good thing. And you have an award of a contract for a public shooting range, helping support that activity. And lastly, you have the town's 50th anniversary book is complete. I've looked at it, it's a great book. It's an awesome book. And you also have an RFP out for the RV park at Old Home Manor. So a lot of good things are moving forward. And then lastly, I'm going to go through this really quickly, but it's just kind of talking about, again, public versus private water utilities. And in some cases, I'll talk about sewer as well. But I'll go through these, but a lot will make sense. But there's some good statistics. Just as you travel down the road, we already have existing public and private utilities serving in Chino Valley besides Chino Valley service area. So these things to keep in the back of your mind as those ideas may come up in the future, especially with private. So talk about the pros and the cons. So it's kind of public versus the private. So the pros, you want to have regarding the loss of control. So the pros for a public utility is local officials keep local control of the vital public resources. Municipal water consumers have input through these public processes or hearings, which you've already had many of those as part of your water utilities. And municipal providers are required to be transparent, open for meetings. You're required to open meeting laws or open public hearings regarding your activities. So the con is, from a private utility standpoint, private third-party water companies are accountable to their boards, investors, not the public. Their decisions are usually behind closed doors or closed meetings, and there are very few opportunities for the public to actually have input in these. And there are little to no requirements for private utilities to be transparent or open.
Mark, so when they go down to the Arizona Corporation Commission, what kinds of information are they, is it mostly just about rates?
Correct. So they're going down to the Arizona Corporation Commission primarily for a rate hearing, which are very expensive, and some utilities that are small can't afford to do those. But those that do them, try and do them every year, and you go on to the Arizona Corporation Commission. It's usually the only, then in front of the Arizona Corporation Commission, that's a required then open meeting law. They will be heard in that hearing, and it's normally a rate case. They have supporting evidence that says they're going to increase rates to X, Y, or Z if they serve water only or it's water and sewer. And then that information is reviewed by the commissioners, and they make a decision, and they may agree with it. And normally they will agree with it because they have hopefully the right supporting evidence that supports that.
So we always have to put out a water quality report every year?
Everybody's
Are
required.
they required to do that
That's
as well to their
correct.
customers? Okay.
Great question. So everybody, whether you're private, a public water supply, or a public utility municipally owned, you're required under ADQ, or the Department of Environmental Quality, to put out an annual consumer confidence report on the water quality and ensure that your water you're drinking annually is, and the requirements are being met, that it meets safe drinking water standards, which is federally regulated by EPA, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So there are federal laws that are kind of imposed by the state, and that's an annual requirement that you must meet. And there's requirements for what kind of constituents that you find in your drinking water that you'd be concerned about, such as arsenic in this area, fluoride, nitrates, those kind of things. And if your water provider must provide those to ensure that you understand where they're at. Yeah, it's required. Conflicting priorities. So if you're a public or municipal, water providers have a goal of providing the highest quality water at the lowest possible price or break even. Enterprise funds are break-even funds. They're not for profit. They are break-even. They do save dollars for capital improvements and other types of activities, and I know Joe can speak more on that, but they are a break-even enterprise fund business. Municipal water providers are focused on providing water service to the entire community. Nobody exempt. They try and look at serving your community. Municipal providers can use the provisions of service for smart growth. Obviously, you have the influence as a board. You're like the board of directors over that utility. You can influence how that water is being used for smart growth, efficiency, increased conservation, and so forth. Municipal water providers can work diligently towards fair and equitable pricing for all customers regardless of income levels. And that's very important. You have diverse levels of income within your community. You want to serve those water based on those levels of consumer usage. A private utility or third-party water provider has a goal that often emphasizes profitability. Private or third-party water providers often cherry-pick water extension projects that exclude low-income communities where water usage is low and billing issues hurt their corporate profits. Private or third-party water providers often partner with developers to supply sprawl development. So you may have a private utility partnering with developer A, B, and C, and when they do water extensions, they may not serve anybody in between, but serve these sprawl developments. And that happens a lot in the valley, up here probably in some regard. And privatized or third-party water providers may undermine fair and equitable pricing through rate hikes, disconnections, and inadequate utility investments that lead to economic consequences. And you may have all know some of those cases. Rate increases. Municipal water providers, their rates are kept as low as possible and just break even. Municipal sewer rates are also trying to just break even. Those rates are the lowest they can be, and they're adjusted accordingly. And municipal water rates increase at or stay very close to the annual rate of inflation. The costs of doing business, even if you're enterprise, a municipal provider, the cost of doing business electricity goes up, chemicals go up, price of construction and labor, it goes up every year. So you try and stay at that rate of inflation. For a typical household, though, for a private or a third-party water provider, the service costs are 59% more than municipal or $185 more per year on average, the national average. Private or third-party sewer charges 63% more than municipal sewer on average. Private or third-party water utilities rate increase about 3 times the annual rate of inflation with an average of 18% every other year. That's a huge rate increase. Operating costs. If you're municipal, your water providers have a requirement for competitive bid process, which you follow as part of your procurement aspect. Municipal water providers keep costs to minimum requirements. A review of municipalities that took back the operation of a private utility, so there was being a private area being served by a private utility or a third party was taken back by municipal, averaged a 21% reduction in the operating costs. So you can see that there was a lot more cost without certain operations. So again, going back to that profitability aspect. So if a municipality took it over, they reduced the rates. Municipal water providers have access to inexpensive money, WIFA, your cheapest money out there to do projects and so forth. It's almost free. The cost of money is very important. But private or third-party water providers do not usually use a bid process. They, third-party or private utilities have increased costs due to corporate profits, taxes, dividends, and non-competitive bid processes. They may just have a select vendor out there they use all the time. Municipalities that implemented private service saw increases in administering the contract. So you may have a municipality who decides that we're going to contract a service area through a private water operator or water service provider. So you're going to see that when that's occurred, there is increases in the administrative cost for that, monitoring, conversion of the workforce, and use of public equipment and facilities, and cost overruns that were seen with those areas of 25%. So, okay. And the cons, lastly, is private third-party water providers use a mix of equity and corporate debt, increasing the cost of money over time. Service problem, again, just real briefly, city operators, municipal operators have engineering standards, best management practices where third-party or private may not. They may use shoddy types of materials, and they may have understaffed issues leading to a number of service-related issues.
I'll add one quick thing on that. One thing we have here locally is we have municipal sewer that may be on private water, so when you come to people not paying their bill, it's a lot harder to deal with those people. But if it was both town-owned water and sewer, you could simply just shut off the meter. So it's an added layer of complication when you're mixing companies.
Now for the fun part. Discussion, council discussion. So the first question I have up there is, what opportunities do you see that should be embraced for current and future growth, growing smarter, and providing benefits to the community? It could be anything that's on your mind or...
By year 2040, 20 years from now, I would like to see all the private water companies in Chino Valley belong to the town, and we are putting infrastructure with it to take that water, that treated water, and put it back on the aquifer, and not increase the number of wells.
To me, I think private industry is so much more effective than the government, and all these statistics in here, all from the EPA, which to me is about as corrupt a outfit as you can get.
And Food and Water Watch, which is respected. Food and Water Watch was also there. We're using both EPA and the statistics there. It was both EPA and Food and Water Watch.
Okay. And as far as the whole procurement thing that we have to go through on costs versus private, you know, and this was really a slanted deal, I felt, that, you know, this was nothing but pro-municipality, where private industry can put water and sewer lines in the ground a whole lot cheaper than the town can, and we've seen that a lot lately.
But they don't
of our
discharge back
costs.
in the aquifer, and that's not helping us.
That's a whole different, deal of where that goes
It's
at
the same
that
deal.
point.
It's the same deal. We continue to drill wells, private wells, and the water, it takes 100 years for that water, if it gets into the aquifer, to get there. If we had infrastructure, and we could take that water from wells or whatever and go into the aquifer, that would help us tremendously. Until we do that, we're gonna continue to overdraft the aquifer. Yes, sir?
I guess I have an you mentioned earlier that you thought it was dropping the aquifer about 1.5 to 3 feet every year, what we're overdrafting the Little Chino aquifer. Is there a way, and I'm all for Chino Valley's growth, but I see the water that we are allowing Prescott to take out of the Little Chino, they're not recharging it to what I understand. And I think what you just mentioned, about 100 years for it to get back down to that level. Is there a way that Prescott could improve recharging the Little Chino aquifer easier, quicker, more efficiently? Right now, it seems like what's going down into the aquifer is about what they would consider a shallow well level, about 100 and some feet, but a deep well somewhere around 300 feet is about where I think where we're drawing our water for Chino Valley and for what Prescott's taking out. You see what I'm saying as far as the deep well recharge is about an 80 or 100-year process. And it seems like we're overdrawing, somewhere along the line we're gonna be overdrawing and we're not gonna be pulling water out, we're pulling air.
So just to clarify some things, Prescott is recharging its water, not currently, and I'll say at their pumping centers, but they are recharging, they have recharge facilities. They are actually recharging their reclaimed water, treating it and recharging it, similar to what Chino Valley is doing. Ours is centrally located in Chino Valley. Yes, they are pumping water from Chino Valley. We're all contributing, so whether it's Prescott, the town, or it's all the aggregated exempt wells, everybody has a well in this small little aquifer, and we're all pumping and pulling the water. Obviously, Prescott is putting water back, Chino Valley is putting its water back. Exempt wells, for the most part, you know, they have private septic systems. They're not putting water back as efficiently, in many instances, not at all, based on location of septic systems or the density of them or lack of density. Could there be some activity? I think not until you have, I'll just put it this way, maybe it's some sort of municipal cooperation into maybe analyzing those things further and having an agreement between Prescott, which Chino Valley and Prescott have a long history of fighting, some of the state Supreme Court cases. I think when you can get past distrust and start working together, then you can start really, I think, focusing more of your ideas toward that. But that's a great question, great point.
Yeah, I looked, there is a group, CWAG, at cwagaz.org. Go there, look and see what some of their thoughts and concerns are with exactly what we're just talking about right there. And the little Chino aquifer, I think, is in peril. The big Chino is not being drawn out, but that's all going down the Verde River mostly. A lot of that's going just as the headwaters.
CWAG's main purpose is to keep wells, don't take our wells away. Well, they don't recharge. That's the other half of our water situation here. We need to get new developers that come in and are private well and get them to recharge back in the aquifer. We're not going, CWAG's not going to do that. I've talked to them till my ears fall off, and they are not supporting the town doing that. So.
Somewhere along the line, there's got to be a meeting of minds, I think.
That's right.
Because there's only so much in that aquifer.
And when the water runs out,
that's
there'll
growth,
be
but
a
I mean,
meeting of minds and to
regulate it, yeah, to
but that's many, many years down the road. On good days.
What are your thoughts on this one, Mr. Vice Mayor? I just want to make sure I hear from every council member on this.
VORCE.
Where are we on this?
We're talking about the opportunities that we see.
Okay.
I mean, I'm all in favor of what you were saying about if you're gonna build a road, put in dry pipes. I think if you're gonna put in sewer, put in water at the same time, while you have the road. And I'm all for infrastructure growth, especially sewer, so we can get that water put back in the aquifer and stop some of the untreated water going into the ground. And I had a thought the other day and I can't remember what it was.
Pretty much agree with the mayor and Jack. A, the infrastructure is critical. B, the water and the infrastructure, the water, the sewer combined, because that affects potential companies that are coming here. And working with a couple companies right now, and the infrastructure is a big question.
So to clarify that, you're kind of supportive then, what I'm hearing is utility expansion is in, I'll say, somewhat support here, strong support, and I want to hear from, Councilman Turner as well on that, but.
Well, I think we've got many different situations here. When you start talking about infrastructure, if we want to bring businesses and so on into our community, we need to work on our infrastructure, which we all know how expensive it is and how difficult it is to get to where we would like to be there. Going back to what the mayor said, though, is that, I don't want to see any more wells. I want everything to go into recharge. And that's an awesome fantasy.
Yes, it is.
But we have large pieces of property in this community. There's more 1 acre parcels than there is anything else. How much does it cost to run 300 foot of water line and sewer line in front of an acre of ground? How much does that cost to get that recharge? So that, I think, is an unrealistic wish list. It's not gonna happen. Now, our new developments, then yes, that we can make that happen with. But no matter how you roll the dice, you are not going to eliminate wells, private wells, and you're not going to be able to get that water to a sewer system. It's, unless we turn into Prescott Valley and we cut up our acreage and we build 6 or 7 houses on one piece of property, are you going to be able to afford to put sewer to all, to all of it?
My idea was not to take the wells, my idea was the private water companies. Bring that into the town municipal system and try to get the infrastructure to it. The wells that people have are hands off as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's just, like I said, to get sewer to those places is not gonna
But we have
happen.
an opportunity to bring the private wells in and possibly increase that discharge.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, the more customers we have on our system, the cheaper we can make the water and sewer to the other customers.
Yeah. And then going back to what this gentleman talked about, I've looked into that myself, and yes, Prescott is recharging. And they will tell you that they're recharging back into the Chino Aquifer because everything runs from south to north. But there's a lot of ground between the airport and Chino.
8 miles, yeah.
And so, my opinion, what I've researched is, no, they're not recharging back into the big Chino Aquifer. Now, they may be recharging back into the big Chino Aquifer for my great-grandchildren, but they're pulling for now. So, everybody's pulling from here. Prescott is pulling the vast majority. It is their right. They're gonna continue to do it to supply their community. But I think that if Prescott really wants to do the right thing, they should run a line from the airport to Chino, and they should recharge into this aquifer because that's where they're pulling it. The same way that I believe that if water is ever gonna be taken from the big Chino Basin, in order to satisfy or even come close to satisfying all of the interested people, is that we're going to have to recharge that water that we pull from the big Chino back to the headwater of the Verde. Then I think people will be as satisfied as you're ever gonna get them. But what that means is that Prescott Recharge needs to get here too. If they can get it to Chino, then in time we could get it to Big Chino. And that's my thought on a real fix to the fix we're in.
Where is the money coming from?
Well, that's it.
That's,
No,
Where are the revenues?
but I think that there's, as a community, as part of the Quad City areas, I feel like Prescott, with what everybody knows now, I feel that Prescott has the obligation to figure out how to fund that. Because it's their future too. You know, just because they have the deepest straw doesn't mean that there's always gonna be water in the Big Chino at the rate that it's being pumped. So, in time, you know, it's gotta happen. And, you know, the study may say, oh, we've got plenty of water. But that's on paper. That's not in the ground.
And the
So-
Depot Ranch is scary too. That master plan community over there, you're talking hundreds of new homes, commercial, YMCA, I mean.
The water's still coming from the same place, so.
now the study that we're doing should hopefully give us some of the models that we're going forward on, should give us a little better idea of what that quantity is,
Correct.
correct? So at least we will have some sort of long-term projection, but still, if it's always a negative, you know, just like in business, if you're losing $1 a day in business, you will eventually go out of business.
That's correct.
It just may take a while.
Now you can make it up in volume.
You make it up in volume.
Okay.
So I think I got some good information on that.
I think a lot of, you know, a whole lot of these pictures, these are, again, pipe dreams, I think, for Chino Valley, changing our culture, you know.
It was just, I wasn't inferring, trying to change that, just, I was using very easy visuals, if you
Because
will.
what I see here is 3 stories, and we know how well that went over.
Sure.
So,
No, definitely, these are way down the road, but they were good visuals that show a clear example of what that looked like. And that could mean something different in Chino Valley today for that.
Shorter mixed use.
Right.
And we can put hitching posts next to those bicycle racks too.
That's right.
Absolutely. I think that's great.
Fourth pass.
That's right.
We have to do it our way.
So next question is, you know, what are the limiting factors? Obviously, you've talked about water as one, but and also the challenge that the town needs to overcome to achieve the smart growth, where we're looking at things holistically in smart growth. Is it regulation? Is it water supply issues? Is it infrastructure? Is there other components that you see?
Revenues.
Money.
Money.
Yeah.
Money. That should be number one, of regulations, should be revenues.
And definitely, I think we're gonna touch on more on the money, so keep that money topic. I think, how do you generate revenue? What makes sense? And what is the benefit of that, the greatest return on that
How do we
revenue?
spread it out to everything that the services we provide together?
Our challenge, I think, is exactly what Lon said. How many square miles is Chino compared to Prescott Valley? We have more miles out here than all of them combined.
Almost.
So it is impossible, to expand our infrastructure much more than our main corridor going through Chino, short of individual subdivisions, again, like Lon
You
said.
have to think about Prescott Valley, it was created by a development company. They built everything. We don't have a development company here. We're having to do it ourselves.
Yeah, but you can use your general plan and your zoning to target those areas for smart growth.
If you follow.
And on exactly what the mayor said, we're flying behind the curve. In other words, things have evolved, just like Topsy, it growed without all that infrastructure.
Not that we're not doing well, we just don't have the revenues and resources to move on down the road. Yes, sir?
Okay, guess what I was thinking about what you said before about the competition sometimes. Is there a way to maybe get the city of Prescott to see that it's in their best interest to help us? Because I know that you mentioned about recharging in this area, the aquifer, and I think that's a great idea. But they're gonna have to come up with that, what would you say, initiative to do that? So to do it properly?
That's a good question.
Are people the powers to be in Prescott, are they, what would you say, looking towards their future through us? I hope.
That's a hard question to answer, but
I would say that they're in a more cooperative mood than they've ever been.
That's good, that's really good.
but
Yeah.
do they have our feelings and their everyday things they do? No. If we go to ask them now, we're more chance now of getting something out of them than we ever were before because of who's in the leadership in Prescott. But they're gonna take care of themselves first, and if they've got anything left, then we get it. But that's really a hopeful, because we've never had that opportunity before. So hopefully it'll continue.
Infrastructure, of course, would be mine out of those four, which would include the water supplies,
Well, yeah, the infrastructure is the most important for our growth. But that takes money. So the most important thing for us to achieve is, I don't know, maybe we ought to buy lottery tickets. The town ought to buy them every week,
Can you put that down here?
Because it's something we're gonna struggle with for a long time, and all we can do is work toward it. As we've stated here, and we've done it many times before, any other community the size of Chino Valley started as a town. They had one building, and then they had two buildings, and then they had three, and they had water, and they extended and they grew. Chino was a farming community. There is no downtown. There never has been a downtown, and who knows when there will be a downtown. But, we're trying to build off of that, and as Chloe said, behind the curve. And so the struggles that we have, I think, are like no one else. The benefit we have is we do have water. But building it out now with infrastructure is gonna be a long, hard struggle. And, if we had all the money in the world, it would be easy, but we don't, and so we're just gonna have to live within our means and keep working at it.
I think you're identifying, I've all heard, you're identifying the growing pains of a small utility over a large area. I think the main thing is, and just contradict me if I'm wrong, but it's just, I kind of feel that you want to grow the infrastructure, and it's kind of that first step forward. It's kind of like, it's taking these baby steps, and that, yeah, the money's not there to grow your infrastructure miles and miles and miles in all directions. And maybe it's every year or 2 years, you're growing your infrastructure a half a mile. And what it's doing is that you're actually, as you grow your infrastructure, you're trying to create these loops, these more reliable, robust water system, more wells that are part of this reliability aspect, robustness of your water utility, but at the same time, you're able to serve new lots, new developments potentially, whether it's along 89 or it's in areas that are a priority type expansion area. But maybe it's more about that, is looking annually, just as long as we're growing the utility in the most prioritized fashion that makes sense from a return on that investment. Maybe that's one way to think about it too, is that aspect.
Okay, we have to move on.
So have we thoroughly identified, analyzed, or quantified the factors or the challenges that currently limit certain activities of the town? And I put, what do you think are the immediate needs and when are they needed? Have you not heard something from myself or staff? Have we missed something, or is there something that's really important to you that you want to have as a priority, and when do you need it, kind of thing? I'm just throwing it up there as another, whether it's water or it's something else.
Can you throw up the next discussion at the same time?
This one?
Yeah, so they can all be discussed at
Sure.
one
Sure.
point. What I'm not clear about, what the council stand is on this, do we need to focus more on maintaining what we already have versus expanding?
I think we have to both. We have to maintain what we have, but we also need to grow. If we don't grow, we die. So we've got to grow some. How much is the decision that the council has to make? How much revenue goes to maintaining what we have, and how much growth? That's the hard part, is how much growth
Okay.
can we afford?
So then when we start getting into the economic development part of this, we need to grow so that we can develop economically, so that we can bring in more money. But meanwhile, are we keeping up with what we have? Is what we have deteriorating at a point that is actually gonna kill our economic development all on its own? When I see subdivisions that the roads are not being maintained on, what attraction is that to a town to bring people to? So that's kind of where I'm at. I brought up to Joe, I would like to see us fully fund our roads. $1.2 million a year to at least get on where we are preserving what we have. And Joe says, that's kind of a far stretch.
You started at 1.5, so I'm glad you
One
got
point, okay,
1.2.
one
Yes,
point
1.5 is what we had.
1.5 would actually get us ahead. 1.2 is a break even.
So when
Well,
we go down
1.5
the
is what
roads
we
and
talked about
streets,
in our.
which is about 2 down, we'll discuss money and.
But that's it. Should we expand water and sewer? Or are we doing, do we need to maintain?
We have to do both, some way.
So part of it's funding. I mean, water and sewer extensions are all paid through enterprise funds, and you can't use those for roads. So there are different sources of funding.
So it's the strategic extension of our water and sewer whenever the opportunity, like, getting down to the mobile home park on Center Street. One of the things that we've never really talked about too on Center Street is we offered an incentive to people, basically half of your impact fees, to connect all the way up. Nobody took advantage of that, one or two. So we missed that opportunity.
Wow.
So is there an opportunity there to grab those customers? What if we, not throwing it out, what if we just waive the connection fees, just to get them on for a certain period of time? So we have sewer lines, there's properties on septics that can connect very easily to get more customers. So you wanna get as many customers on our system as possible, you know that. But then the, mobile home park, is it Juniper or like that's always wants to catch?
Oh, Roadrunner?
Roadrunner.
Right.
That's a lot of customers, a lot of density, a lot of people, you know, so it's a good revenue stream if we can get there. We know we have a private developer bringing a sewer line up to there, but as soon as that line's there, we should connect that. So
Right.
strategically expanding our sewer particularly will pay dividends, just to keep adding customers, get more people using the system, more recharge, it's just impossible.
So I think one of the challenges there, that's a matter of opportunity. We have a developer who's doing it right there, so then we're gonna do Roadrunner and pick up some commercial pieces right there, just like we did Molly Ray. So we ran up Center Street to get to Molly Ray. But if we look at just investing money, we don't have a master plan, or do we just wait until the opportunities come and then expand from there?
And I think
that's,
that's a lot of the, if you're talking about making a plan, we have to know how much money we can spend,
Right.
so you can know how much you can plan.
How much,
Or vice versa, you need to know, this is our plan and we need this much money, so, how, we gotta have some idea, otherwise we're just kinda talking in a circle.
yeah, because when they come to my office and when we do this, it's like, the first question is, well, how much? And that's gonna drive how we fund it.
But
There may be a point in time where we, because right now, we're just trying to self-fund these little projects. These little $250,000 or less projects. And the enterprise funds can come and do that for one or two. I mean, then we're gonna use it. But there might be a plan, a project, if we had a plan that we knew that, hey, this is $2 million out here, we gathered this many customers, maybe that's when we will debt finance a project or a major system expansion. And we just have never taken the time to figure that out.
And I agree, but if we knew that we had 1.2 million, example, going on the roads every year, and we had 1.7 million going towards, utilities expansion, then we could do better planning. But not knowing that, and whatever that number would be,
Even if it's 500,000.
yeah, whatever it is, if it's $10,
And not cut our current programs. We gotta take a strong, are we gonna cut the $700,000 in gas to Old Home Manor Business Park to fund roads? I don't know, that's a good question. Do we cut senior center to fund roads? Well, we've got some decisions to make, what we think is important and needed.
What I like about numbers generally don't lie. That to do a road runner, how long does that take to pay that back versus what does it cost?
It's an easy calculation.
So,
Return on investment.
to go back to what we're looking at, should we expand water and sewer? I would think that expanding to residential is probably a very slow payback to the town. Where,
No question
and,
about that.
and we, don't let me talk too much, but we have our sorry. You know what I'm talking about. We're developing a water plan in our commercial area now. So to me, if we're gonna be putting sewer in,
we should be.
because of the economic development factor,
Should be in a community.
focus more on our commercial corridor at this point, like we have Old
I
Home
agree
Manor
with you 100%.
potential there.
Where there's density.
Where there's
And
density.
access.
Or proposed density.
One quick question. So let me ask this question. So let's just say that on this arbitrary numbers here, just for discussion's point, we do a study that says if you run water and sewer down SR 89
They will
between this and this, what financial gain revenue stream could you expect? So it's very typical, right back to the numbers question. If it takes, let's just say it's $10 million for water and sewer down 89, but the economic growth of that from businesses, commerce, jobs, taxes, to the general fund is 20 million. Would that justify those expansions, even though they're different funds? Maybe the two funds can work because you can borrow from the general fund, the enterprise and so forth, and Joe knows all about that, but if those two can work in tandem to do exactly what you're saying, is that something you would support?
Sure.
That type of activity?
That if
To
those
show that.
profits then go into
And those studies.
the sewer
that
funds.
show those, right, those studies are relatively expensive, but they show hard numbers as to what the costs of infrastructure are, what you'd anticipate in the time payback, let's say, because SR 9 is not gonna build out next year, it's gonna be 10 years, 15,
Be
20.
careful, we're on a high economic development area now. We're making plenty of bucks right now. If the economy's gonna drop, and it's going to, History says you're cyclical.
Sure.
So we make sure that we have contingency funds and enough money to last till the next economy rises again. We don't want to spend all our money or dedicate all our money without some extra money set away.
I just have a comment on the commercial corridor. So, for example, when Burger King is already opening ground, I understand why we can't do sewer because you'd have to have a lift station that's going in the wrong direction, correct?
No,
So-
Burger King's on sewer.
No,
Yes.
well, I mean,
They're
but
getting sewered.
moving, while the ground's already open, having a plan for the town to also, hey, they're already doing this, let's go X amount further.
Oh,
So from what I understand, on Burger King, Frank, sewer is going in the wrong flow over there, so that wouldn't work. But how about if there's a, it's road going south, say that that whole property starts getting developed, and at the very end of it, where there's no water, and as a Safeway, or not a Safeway, like say a Bash just comes in and they run all the utilities, and the ground's already open, at what point, can we plan on also going X amount further each time that happens?
Right, that's.
And I don't know if
Talking
that's
about
been
we take
discussed,
advantage
but,
of opportunities as they come.
yeah.
Once we know somebody's there, then we try to, like the apartments down there on the highway really would love to be on sewer.
To answer your question, Perkinsville Road, anything south of Perkinsville Road, we can gravity feed to our treatment plant. Once you go north of Perkinsville, then you're looking at having to pump it, and then the cost goes up exponentially from there.
depending on where the lines are. The example she was talking about, I think she was trying to say Sonic, is if you got Burger King on sewer, why can't you get Sonic? Because your sewer runs out of the ground because it's downhill. But if you came up from Perkinsville, you could catch it, but we don't have that line in place yet, so. That's why I put the quotes on, depending on where the lines are.
Well, and like, well, road on South has sewer. They have every utility there, Prescott Water, city sewer.
So we really
So-
need a plan, which we don't have. So that's something to look at. How are we gonna do that? We need to sit down and talk about finances. Our finance committee needs to get together and talk about what money we have, where it's going, and what can we divvy out to roads, what can we divvy out to water. And see if we can actually, once we find out what money we have in revenues, we can start making plans of what we can do and where we can put that money.
I don't wanna go on to the next thing until I get a chance to. So I've been waiting patiently for these guys to be quiet, so I got a chance.
Mr. Turner?
Point noted.
Wow.
You know, the whole idea of the infrastructure and that is something we need to continually look at and figure out how we can fund it. But right now, I think if we listen to the public, we need to fund our roads. And until we fund our roads, I don't see where we have any money to do anything else. You know, so what do? The community said, we want our roads fixed, but we don't want to pay any more taxes to do it. I looked at your budget, you're gonna see it, and you're gonna have to tell me if I'm all wet or if I'm even close, but it looks to me like about 6 to 7% of our budget would fund our roads. Am I close?
I'd have to do the exact calculation. You're probably, I mean.
Okay. So I'm gonna throw something out there that nobody's gonna wanna hear, but, it's the story that Corey brought up about the bank account. You know, if you keep taking more out than you put in, you eventually run out of money. What's the reality of going in and saying that we need to do this? We're gonna go in and we're gonna cut our budget across the board with everybody in our town by whatever we need to fund our roads. And then we start again from their building. So every department gets cut. 6%, 7%, whatever it is. We start our road maintenance program, and then we start building. If we can't afford the payment on the new car, then we get rid of the new car and we fix the old one. You know, I don't know another way to do it at this point. So if somebody else has got a better idea,
Sure, I
I'm
have a
open.
better idea. Let's let our citizens come up and say, we need our roads fixed and we'll fund you to do it. That
I'm- I-
means they've
I-
gotta bring it to, we made a mistake. We started with the town and asked them. We need them to come and tell us, we want our roads fixed and we'll pay for it. 'Cause we can fix the roads.
They did tell us they want their roads fixed, they
But
just
they
don't
didn't
wanna,
fund it, and that's
Yeah,
the
they don't wanna
side.
pay for it.
Gotta have money.
they don't wanna pay more for it.
No, they don't wanna pay anything for it. They
Okay.
they don't want a road tax. They don't wanna pay anything for the roads. We get her funds, we get, what, a couple $1 million a year? And we about another, what, 18 million? To really do a program, so we're way short, even if we take what we can. We can take some extra money and put on the roads. We're never gonna fix it.
I
You
just
just
told.
don't have
I-
enough
I-
revenue to do that.
I just brought up an idea on how to fix them.
Okay, so you have two ideas. Take some more money, put on the roads, or let our citizens come up and tell us, yes, we want our roads fixed and we'll fund them. Okay,
Okay,
let's
I'm
move
done.
on. And we'll take a look at that with the budget, with the finance committee, and see what the budget looks like and where we can drag some more money out for roads.
Just a few more questions. Should the town develop new or modified mixed land use plans that are supported within the general plan? They talk about these core development areas. Again, it's kind of a loaded question. I didn't mean to make it a loaded question, but that are predictable, fair, and cost effective. And what does that really mean? So what does that, what does it look like to you? I know that sometimes you hear about maybe a lesser dense area is opposing a more higher dense right next door to it, in their backyard, so to speak. So what does it look like to you to have these, it goes back to there's not a downtown in Chino Valley, but maybe it's several of these core areas. Here's a job core area, here's a housing high-density core area that gets less dense, whatever that looks like. Maybe this is a commercial entertainment core area, whatever that looks like. I'm just throwing it out there arbitrarily, but what do you see with that? I mean, how do you want us to, from staff, to work towards, whether it's a new UDO aspect or development or the next general plan? What does that look like to you? And how do you want us to kind of come up with moving this forward?
I think what we've pretty much come up with in the past is that, again, our old home, our business park out there, we have put it out in an area that is kind of a standalone. So even though it may be more industrial, it's now away from everything. But as far as the mixed land use, we have it. There's nothing we can do about it. Like Lon said, this was, we're hodgepodge already. So I think we're doing a fairly good job, and I think the council's being, when we rezone something, that we don't jump from an A to a D, that we put A's next to B's and B's next to A's and C's, that we're trying not to just, plop something that really doesn't fit. And I think we recently went through a thing with the 3-story deal, that we will be more observant about that as they come in front of us now.
Anybody else want to have a difference of opinion or another position on it, or?
I agree with what Corey said. I mean, I think as our population changes, people that are used to density, people that hate density, people that move away from density, and people that want density, I mean, it's a catch bag. So, I don't know. I don't have your answer.
May I ask a question? Just looking at from Josh's point of view, several years ago, one of the things that we heard a lot around here about this type of question was we needed like senior communities. We know Joe Cordovana tried to start one or two, and he had intended on putting a beauty salon and some other things right there, so it would be an entire community. And that was a big deal because we had a lot of older people who didn't want to live on their acreages anymore, but are you hearing that anymore? I'm just curious if that's still an issue here. Because that's one type of development that, I mean, I've lived here 26 years now, and I used to hear about it all the time. I haven't heard about it recently.
It's
but-
still out there. I hear about it
Yeah.
once or twice a month from the elderly
But
folks.
those are the kind of community cores. I mean, I know the general plan talks about agricultural community course.
That's a
and
big
that sort of
investment,
thing,
and I don't know what the return on the investment would be.
Yeah, I don't either.
Be nice if we had some.
I think those are economic driver all on their own.
Yeah, and they usually
Prescott
are.
for a long time, the economic driver in Prescott was, it was a retired community, which basically they imported their money with their bank accounts and they spent it right there, that you didn't need manufacturing because they were living off that retirement money that they brought into the community. So I would think, and again, until something comes in front of us, you know, in a zone change or zone, you know, request, that I would be open to that, but I don't think we're closing the door to the idea.
I also,
No, I know nobody wants.
I also think that the first larger development that comes in here is probably what's gonna be flowed here. Like if it's manufactured apartment, I mean, or like apartment buildings, then probably another, and it goes well, then probably another one will come in. If it's retirement, then
Yeah.
they'll probably do another I don't know. You
Just-
two
I
would
was
know
just
better than that
curious.
than me.
The median age here is 65, so really we're largely an retirement community anyways in all of Yavapai County for the most part.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times that derails people from wanting to go in and put 55 plus communities.
'Cause they're already here. I just know I
Because
used to
we-
hear from a lot of people here saying,
I haven't heard about it much.
I've been in my homestead for 40 years, I'm 80 some odd years old, and I don't wanna take care of an acre anymore, but I wanna stay in Chino.
Yeah.
And they've all
That's
left.
true.
So,
And what came out the other day at the governor's
Yes, I'm
session, some of us were at, and not only was it said there, but it is broadcast, Yavapai area is a target growth area. People are coming here, they're bringing money here, and much like you stated, they're the retired, they've got their resources, they've worked their life for. They don't really wanna be tilling an acre or 2 acres. They want it like that. And the other thing that's happening, there's a lot of money headed this way. This last month or so, the insurance companies paid off the fire homes in Northern California, and that money is coming here cash. People aren't fixing their homes, they're coming to Arizona, and our area is where they're headed, and it's showing up. Now they're showing up these 30-day escrows with cash in the bank when they open the account. Anyway, that's just a thought.
Okay, we're gonna take 5 minutes.
Okay, when we come back, can we introduce our new employee?
Yes.
ah,
See another one on
I like your idea. Which one? The budget.
Yeah.
I like your
And
idea
actually,
too.
it's not even that high because there's already have 2% going in now. So it actually.
Mayor, can she introduce?
Pardon?
Can she introduce our new?
No?
Yes, of course.
Except we're missing a couple council members.
Let's hold off a minute. We got a couple of council
Two.
people.
Yeah, hold on. That's why I said, nobody listens to me.
There must be a reason.
Coming across so hard. I'm all hard on the outside. I said, you're all hard on the outside. Goo on the inside. Yeah, total goo. All gooey on the inside. Hard on the outside.
Part of it's a size.
Yes. There's that intimidation factor. Yeah, boy, he's so tall.
One of the noises that I struggle with.
He's taller than I am.
I used to work with a gal that
Are you 6'7"?
I'm good.
6'6"? How tall are you?
6'3".
how do I not crunch?
I think of you as a taller person, so I'm intimidated by you because I think you're taller. Aren't you taller than me?
Yes, he's taller than me.
I'm 6'5".
See?
I'm 6'6".
You're the big man. I'm just a little chunk of cheese. Probably blue cheese. Or what's that nasty feta cheese?
How do you know what blue cheese is?
Instead of 3?
You
You
don't.
don't, it doesn't come back. It never-
Turns green.
It turns green, yeah, there you go. It goes from blue to green.
Okay. We have a new prospective employee here, and Laura's gonna introduce him.
Perspective?
I guess is he really one, or is he prospective?
After this, he's.
He might change his mind.
Did you,
How you behave.
Joe, did you meet him? Did you meet him yet? Okay,
I
good.
did.
Avoid him.
Avoid him, yeah.
It takes all
So
your money.
last week, Josh, myself, Frank, Joanne, and Dan had the opportunity to meet Hans Friedel. He interviewed for the senior planner position, knocked our socks off. We extended a verbal offer, and hopefully we can, yeah. I don't have socks on. We're looking to close the deal, today.
So behave yourself.
But Hans has such an extensive background in planning. I think he would just be a great addition. I don't know if you have any questions or if you'd like to kind of share just a quick 2-minute background, on your education and experience.
Yeah, well, my name's Hans Friedel, nice to meet everybody. I've got about 7 years of planning experience. I was born in California, but we moved to northern Colorado when I was 2. So I grew up in Colorado, then lived half my life in Austin, Texas. Then went to graduate school there, so I have a master's in applied geography, land management, and also a master's in secondary education. Then moved back to the Denver area and worked as a senior planner there for 5 years. I'm an American Institute of Certified Planners, so the AICP. Had been fortunate to have a really cool interdisciplinary background working in cities around large metropolitan areas. So I was a planner for historic Lockhart, Texas, which you may know is the official barbecue capital of the state. And my state legislative degree, and there's a whole feud with the different barbecue joints there for several families that have been operating different barbecue restaurants.
Yep.
And then also in the Dallas area, and then for Lone Tree, Colorado for the last 5 years, I've been senior planner, rapidly growing edge city of the Denver area. So super happy to be here. It's a beautiful environment around here as well. It reminds me a lot of southern Colorado, so very good.
So your last position was in a town that was very similar in size to us.
Yeah, so Lockhart was about 12,000. Lone Tree's 15,000, going on, I'd say 40,000.
Yeah.
So it's gonna almost triple its size in the next 10 years. It's got, even though it's similar in population, it's got 5 light rail stations and quite a very urban small city. So it's got some major employers like a major Charles Schwab campus that employs 5,000. So a regional hospital. So every day, Lone Tree's population doubles with the number of employees that come in there, and they commute back to their different areas.
That's great.
But similar in size, I mean, working for small to medium-sized organizations, I've always had to wear a lot of hats. And so I've managed the website for the city of Lone Tree before, and had to do that for a year, and different things like that. So in addition to long-range and current planning and those kinds of tasks.
Cool. Well, welcome.
Welcome.
Some good barbecue recipes.
And you can order it now.
That was in the agreement.
Yes, you can, yeah, we have the recipes. You can also order barbecue from Lockhart, and they'll ship it to you on the Facebook that's right nice.
Nice.
Awesome.
Kind of like Omaha Steak.
If you haven't been there, you're missing barbecue.
Well, thanks for your time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Water and Utilities Subcommittee report, do we have one?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Chair.
Okay, Water and Utilities report from recent meeting. We discussed mainly three different water study options. Our study at Old Home Manor, and I may ask Mark to give a little bit more explanation if anybody's got questions on exactly what that has to do with, but study for Old Home Manor to take a look at our water availability. We talked about the satellite water system and doing a study regarding it, and the Highlands Ranch well. Basically that withdrawal area, whether we should do a study to see if drilling a well in another area, what was it, 160 acres?
660 feet.
Six, 600, okay.
Yeah, from that
That's
well.
available where if we wanted to do a replacement well or whatever. So the recommendation was to move forward, stay with the Old Home Manor study. Felt like that was very important. Everybody agreed on that. And you guys tell me if I'm speaking out of turn here.
Yes.
The need for the satellite system on the south end of town, that's what we were talking about, just using that as an example. That'll be future, the future of something like that, at least in that area, would be determined on where we end up with our negotiations with Prescott, on our deal with water, with them supplying water. So, we chose to just sit on that and not spend any additional money at this time, okay, on something like that. And then the Highlands Ranch, maintaining control of that withdrawal area is an asset that we may use in the future, but not something that we felt like we should spend money on at this time. Again, being a separate study, we can decide that we want to do that 6 months or 5 years from now, whenever that comes up.
So essentially, you want to focus on the Old Home Manor water study.
At this time, yes.
Okay.
That's the recommendation of the committee.
Okay. And do we need to put any money with that, or revenues, or?
There were dollars and cents, and I don't have those right now.
Corey does.
Corey does?
I can speed those out real quickly.
Go right ahead.
So-
Got all the civil text stuff here, but yeah.
We had put together a budget of $250,000 for that study, because again, it's looking at water resources. It looks at your water system, wastewater system, and reclaim system, along with a capital improvement, 5-year capital improvement plan. We came in just over budget at about $287,000. There was a contingency in the budget being proposed. I'll announce on the 25th who actually was selected, but there's a contingency. They may have to go out, this company may have to go out and actually do some sewer monitoring and look at some of the big flow areas and what times of the day as part of the reclamation side. So there's $25,000 in that budget that may or may not be needed, so we're fairly close to the budget. So it's around 250 to 287.
So we're just going to the finance committee and come back to the council?
It's on the council agenda
It's
for
on
the
the council
25th,
agenda.
it's
All right,
utility.
For the 25th, okay, good, good. Anything else?
So these are the priorities you guys came up with, like these?
Well, I had some points up there. It seemed, if I can jump in. and
Sure,
help out,
go ahead.
The chairman. I think Old Home Manor Master Plan was pretty much the top priority, keep moving forward with that. And then look, another priority, and I don't know if you mentioned it, at least some of the members wanted to look at sewer along Highway 89, coming up from Perkinsville Road, and what it would take to try and hit some of those commercial properties, and also the residential behind them along that. So, and then, like I said, lower priority, or if at all, satellite service, and then, of course, we've always gotta start looking at the, I don't know how to say it properly, Paulden area, or water importation is.
Yeah, Wine Glass Ranch.
That's the big Chino Water Ranch. I probably said it wrong, but the Wine Glass Acres area, just to keep that in mind, but.
Lon, did you discover sewer along 89 from Perkinsville at all?
Pardon?
Did you discuss in your committee the sewer along 89?
Yes, Frank just asked if we thought that was something that we would like to get more information on and have him, put some things together, and said, sure,
Okay.
So that's what we're still trying to develop, kind of
Where? And
chicken and egg, with how much money and what it would take and
so
what the
identify
return would
where
be
you
on
want to
that.
do that, and then how much money it takes to do that.
Well, and there's other things involved too, as far as easement issues and things like that would have to be dealt with, and to go back up and take that, at Perkinsville and start running it south, toward the Burger King.
Did you guys talk about Road 1 East at all? Sewer on Road 1 East,
As far as,
heading it south?
well, we talked about, yes, we did talk about that. We also talked about the fact that there will be some expansion on the Peavine Trail, with the planned loop. And so, I asked, well, what if we just kept going on the Peavine Trail?
Instead of on 1 East, go
Instead-
down the Peavine, so you don't have to deal with the road, you can just put the water line in.
Obviously, it would be really nice to have it on 1 East, but how much further south could we get and then cut back in if we went on the Peavine Trail? Would it be that much cheaper that we could get, more miles of pipe in?
Okay.
Well, that's going to be considered, and we're going to get some costs on that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
get some plans and costs.
or cost of plans.
Okay. Very good. Anything else,
Not unless somebody's got more questions,
guys?
or you guys have anything to add?
No, that
Okay.
was,
Just future, where we talked about future, but nothing now.
Let's go on to B, sewer plant capacity. Frank?
And also in the utility committee, we discussed this a little bit. Point out some triggers that are typical. Right now, the plant's designed for 500,000 gallons a day, so when it hits 400,000 gallons a day, we need to be under design. At 450, we need to be under construction. That's not $280,000, that's 280,000 gallons. I'm sorry. Right now, we're rising about 20,000 per day, which equates to about 100 homes per year. And the utility committee basically thought that,
Per day, per year? That's not right.
yeah,
1,000 per day, per year.
yeah. Last year, we're at 260, this year, we're at 280, next year, we'll be around 300 per day.
Okay, I thought that meant an additional 20,000
Yeah,
a day.
every day.
Yeah, each year.
Each year, so, okay.
But it's not really money, it's
I
gallons.
know.
It's gallons per day, but I'm looking at it each year.
Okay.
Oh, trust me, it's more.
So we think we have enough time to wait and evaluate again next budget year.
so the math figured out there,
8 years,
we were how many years out?
8.5 years.
8.5 years before we need that.
So we're,
At this growth rate.
unless we hit some sort of extreme failure, we still got time before we need to expand the plant. But there were some current needs that were discussed that we're looking at, which ties into the septic thing, which have been over and over and over with. We're still looking forward, as part of that is the equalization basin, and along with that is the blower improvements and repairs and septic receiving. All these three are tied together in the same study, which is currently underway. We're working with Kimley Horn on that study right now, and we'll bring those results back to the committee when they're done.
What's the timeframe on that?
I've got an email sitting in my inbox with an update, but haven't had a chance to look at it. But it's more weeks than months.
Okay.
We're looking at preliminary, the demand side of the septic receiving in about a month or so, and then we're talking 2 or 3 months, I think, for the whole thing.
This budget cycle or the next?
For the report itself, so that,
And we make decisions from there.
yeah, and then we'd have to do design in the next budget year, so it might be FY '22 before we go construction. We may be able to start some construction in FY '21 if we have funds appropriated, so we may wanna look at some placeholders for that. But is that pretty much from the committee members, what we talked about as far as the plant goes?
Yeah, I think so.
So,
Update on enterprise funds. Mr. Duffy?
Well, I didn't prepare a slide because I know Jack doesn't like them, so. I'll have some additional stuff when we get further down the agenda. Overall, our enterprise funds they're both solidly in the black. We're seeing good, healthy revenues for the water and the sewer. And it's really the additional homes that are coming in that are driving that factor. So one of the questions I know, Lon, I'll be bringing back to April and May, I'll do another analysis, but can we continue to decrease our sewer rate? So as things are going today, I'm thinking, yes, we'll continue to be able to drop a couple of dollars every year to get to that state average, which we told the community that we're doing. This year, and I've just done, where I am in the budget, I've done preliminary projections for all of our revenues and all of our expenses across the board. I have not met with the departments yet. So I have some, but not all of them. They will, basically after today's meeting, once we get firm direction from council, what our budget priorities are, then we'll meet with the department and do what we need to do to reach those priorities. But then we'll know what we have available also. So understand everything is preliminary. But over the next 5 years, I see the water systems fund balance, basically, how they're doing, growing about $100,000 per year. So this is money that we put away for capital expansions, or increasing
This is at our current rate?
at our current rate. And well, I'm throwing in a little bit of a growth factor.
I'm just meant with the rate that we're charging.
Yes,
It'd
no,
be the
we,
same.
we are on a 5-year rate plan, we're at year 3 of that, and we've been increasing our water rates 3% with a regressive rate schedule, trying to encourage conservation also. So, the operation of the plant's one part of that when we do our rate analysis, but we're also following, we're trying to raise it enough to encourage people to conserve and put in zero landscaping and all that kind of stuff. And we thought it was a plus with Prescott saying, hey, we're following, because that's what they're doing too. We're following that plan, protecting the aquifer. So you have that component in it also. But the Water Enterprise Fund, at the end of the day, every year, we're adding about $1,000 to our, or $100,000 to our reserves, which is helping. Gives us some money for capital, future capital expansions. The Sewer Enterprise Fund's doing almost about $200,000 a year for every year that I'm projecting. My fear, though, is a lot of that's driven by new home construction, and we only have a few lots left in Bright Star and a few lots left in Highlands Ranch. Well, we got quite a few in Highlands Ranch. But that's the last developed subdivision that we have, and we know they're gonna be able to see. Getting some other connections, but not with the So as we see that fill up, the projections are gonna go down, because I just don't think we're gonna be adding the same number of homes unless we get another subdivision or two coming.
Well, we've got 3. We've got Century Ranch,
Right.
Heritage Point.
Craftsman.
Heritage
Craftsman
Point is
Court.
not sewer.
That's true. Heritage, Craftsman Court.
Where are these at? I'm sorry, you have to help me.
All right, Craftsman's Court is off of Road 1 East and Juniper, which is,
Okay, Fletcher's.
no,
It's
that's
across the
Paul
street.
Landing.
Oh, the one south.
Correct. Century Ranch is
Perkinsville.
north of Bright Star.
Perkinsville.
Yeah, it's out by Amy's.
Perkinsville.
Yeah, but see, when are they gonna really turn dirt, and when are we gonna see the infrastructure? So
If-
they're in the process.
Same with Hawks Nest.
Yes. So Colonial Villas, they're gonna be adding on, so I'm just putting a red flag out there. I'm saying, guys, the growth might not continue like this, it might level off if we don't have more subdivisions. So that's it. I mean, we're very positive, we're putting money, we're adding money to that every year. We can do some strategic sewer extensions, a couple $100,000 extensions. Wouldn't break the bank with these ones, knowing that we're gonna have also revenue coming in too. So they're in very, let's say, a very stable condition at this point.
Do the connection fees go into that account?
Yes. Yeah, the only ones that don't is Highlands Ranch, because we reimburse the developer because he's prepaid for his
Okay.
capacity. So we're still paying, but all the other ones, we're getting 100%.
Before we before you bring to us a possible rate reduction, could we possibly get what the sewer expansion cost is gonna look like, even though it's 8 years out? Just in case we might wanna project, maybe not pull back and start saving for that day. Is that?
Oh, I agree, but it's something we gotta consider too, that our sewer expansion, it would go up the highway or we go wherever we go.
No, I'm talking about plan expansion.
Oh, I was gonna say, that's gonna directly affect the capacity of the plant, and then we're talking about sewage receiving sewage and septic. And if we do that, so that plant may be coming a lot earlier than what you think, possibility.
Could be.
Well, and I'll analyze the total number of customers we'll have between there with the revenue stream before that, the impact fees that they're paying. Essentially, we're paying.
Bless you.
Let's see how much. One of the things that we do have that's just, we're gonna use a little bit of it this year, is we are funding our repair and replacement fund fully with WIPA. And one of them is even voluntary, but we went ahead and did it, so don't quote me on this, but we have about $900,000 just sitting in the bank and we're gonna use it, we used it to do the filters, $350,000, and now it's built back. And WIPA just wants you to
Is there a quantity, is there a level, like percentage or anything, or?
No, they just asked for a certain amount per year, so I'm thinking around 120 to 130 a year that we just put in the bank. It's just, it's really, WIFA says you borrow money for 20 years, you build a $12 million plan. Things are gonna break. Put money aside to fix it. So that's the money we put aside to fix it. And when the loan's paid off, well, we can use the money anytime for a viable reason anyway, but when the loan's paid off, so it's almost like a down payment maybe in the future.
Joe, have we lowered our sewer rates, how many years now, 2?
64, 62.
So we got 2 more. I think we estimated that if we kept dropping it, that roughly that 3% for 5 years, we'd be even with surrounding areas.
You're thinking that the average in the state's gonna be going up a little bit, so somewhere in the 50, mid-50s.
So I get what you're saying, but it's real important for us to follow through with that.
Okay.
Because we told people we would do it, okay? Those people that went on the sewer initially got it handed to them, and so I think that's our responsibility to at least get them back down to where we're on even keel with the rest of the surrounding communities.
Agreed.
And so we're getting new homes that are coming on, and so we're still going up even though we're not rates a bit because we're getting so as long as we see the growth, we're gonna be positive. But red flag, conservative, if we run out of developable lots, the growth is gonna level or drop. So.
We've seen them come in, but we haven't seen them built yet.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to item 5, consideration discussion regarding roads. Frank and Corey.
Okay, you want me to?
Well, if you got the same thing I do,
We'll see if you match.
Let's hope we match.
Oh, I wanted to, if I could go over some of the funding in years past real quick. This is just an old slide we got where we typically look for, right now, we're looking at about 350,000 that we're putting into roads per budget. This year we did more, and I'll go over that, but, it was as low as 150,000 or 0 when the economy was down, so this is an excerpt from our, ballot question that we had that we went over a lot. So that's kind of the $1 million in HERF. Right now, it's looking 350,000 or so goes to pavement preservation or hiring contractors. This kind of shows what we've done in the past few years. 2017 was about 385,000. 2018, we put in about 865,000, but that included the Road 1 East project, which was the old.
This is money from, where's this money coming from?
The budget.
The budget. This is
But where? from
general
the budget?
funds?
Well, road
Various-
East was the remaining road impact fees that we
Okay.
had, so we used up, exhausted that.
Yeah, so the 300,000 was HERF money, the 65,000 was out of HERF, but it was, our guys doing some work, buying some rock, that sort of thing. The about 500,000 was the last of the impact fee money that the town had banked over the years, for that 865. And then last year, we put about 700,000 from mostly HERF, I think a little bit of general fund money in there.
100,000.
100,000 of general fund money, but that was included an extra 200,000 of HERF money the state allocated after the budget came out. So that's how we got that 700,000 done. And then Chino Meadows was CDBG money that came in, but we actually spent 1.2 million last year on roads, if you add up the different funding from there. And this was the list of roads, and we got about a little under 7 miles. This was all, Chino Meadows was 2 inches and all the others were 3 inches of asphalt. So they should be some decent roads put in there. And some of the others, the older roads, we got much further because it was chip sealed, but they're not gonna last near as long. So that's kinda just to give you an update of what we've been doing, so. And then Corey, I think if you wanted, I think these might be
well,
some
what we
of the
looked at is
projects.
what our 2021 potential projects were. And if we were to be able to check everything off, we would need $7.7 million to do it.
Yep.
So we had to we whittled that down And the consensus was that we need to focus more on arterial roads. Secondary roads are just not gonna happen. Any of the subdivisions, Appaloosa, Bright Star, Highlands Ranch, pretty much nothing for their neighborhoods this year. We did look at Road 2 North there at Safeway, that it's getting pretty beat up, and that's one that we think that we wanna focus on this year, basically get it saved before it completely comes apart. And then, Road 1 South and 1 East intersection.
Can I ask about the 2 north though? That's just to repair what we have there, not any expansion or?
Correct, that's just what, yes, that's no additional drainage to it, it's
no
just a read,
sidewalks? Okay.
you know,
Yeah, that's basically a
Clean it
mill and
up.
fill in this red area.
Okay.
And I did go out and look, and it's almost to right there, about halfway down the car wash, I think, Corey, is where we could find a good edge to catch.
yeah.
But that's just pavement replacement, nothing fancy, trying to keep what we got.
We're gonna look at scheduling on when this can be done, in retrospect to the 1 South intersection.
One north.
I'm sorry, 1 North. We don't want both of them going on at the same time. We're working out the logistics on that yet,
Either before or after
1.
the signal.
Yep. And then, depending on how much money we have, 1 East and 1 North.
So is that just intersection that, is that what
Yeah,
you're talking about there?
The 50,000, this is a kind of a picture, this is actually a road, this is 1 East at 1 South. If you can, folks that know the area, this fence is where the irrigation well is. You can see that it's all patch material, there's nothing there. So that was a pretty high priority for the committee, was to at least see if we can get enough money to get that intersection. I don't have a picture of 3 South, they looked at that, but we'll evaluate that and see if that one's as bad. There's a lot of water that crosses that intersection when it floods. But I think that's the highest priorities the committee came up with for this year, given we might get about 350,000.
So at that point, we're definitely, that's why the push from the roads committee of, appealing to the council that we need to get some more funding for our roads, so we're on the right direction.
So how much do you need? What are you asking for?
If I'm not mistaken, it was $1.2 million just to maintain. If we expect to improve, we're up at
Or it was
1.5.
1.5.
Huh?
1.5 is what we had.
To maintain?
No, I
To
thought that
maintain,
was
is
the-
it
I thought,
maintain and improve?
I thought that was maintain and improve at 1.5.
I thought the 2 million was.
Yeah, 2 million
Was
was
it-
with the
So
additional
it's
money for her.
1.5 and 2.
That's what we had for the property tax was 1.5. And then 2 million with the
Because-
extra
okay.
HERF got us up to
Because
2
we still
million.
had HERF in there to,
The HERF was on in addition
On
to the
top of.
1.5 that got us close to 2 million.
okay.
Charles said it was 1.2 plus her.
Let's bring that back to the finance committee, and
Yes.
from there it'll come back
So,
to the council.
yeah, so not that I'm gonna, solve the problem today, but one of the ideas I've had, I see comfortably we have 400,000 if we just continue doing what we've been doing easily, because we've been adding more from the general fund, plus we have to go from her funds. But one of the things we need to look at is right now our reserve balance is $5.8 million. Per code, we need about $3 million. So we have an extra $2.8 million sitting there. And maybe we peel off $500,000 and allocate that to roads, or a number somewhere in there to do a little bit more. That'll get you closer to, $900 to $1 million. So it's one of the proposals I'll be bringing forth to the finance committee to talk about. And it's the same, we pulled $2 million over last year to the capital improvement fund to do all the old program and the gas line, paying off the lease purchase stuff. Well, every year we've been rolling over between $300,000 to $500,000. So even with our conservative projections, I'm thinking that we pull $500,000 over and just give it to her fund for next budget year. There's a good likelihood that will roll over an extra $200,000 or $300,000. I have no action on the money all said and done. So it might only be a net cost of an extra $200,000, but I'll bring it to the finance committee. So the concept though is to start, sort of pre-fund the HERF funds with what we're anticipating we're gonna roll over it every year. That we've been doing to build those reserves up to where we are today. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And what fund is that you were talking about?
This is general fund.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is general fund.
And on that note, I know it might not be looked upon favorably, but at some point, we're gonna start needing to look at a organized plan for road maintenance if we start throwing a bunch of money into it. So we're gonna need to really beef up a pavement management program that'll actually be a good, objective, scientific way to prioritize these roads and do the math and give you the numbers of how much deferred maintenance we have. Develop your 5 and 10-year capital improvement plan to be able to best use that money.
Which
the
we have a
most
certain
efficient
amount of that
way possible.
already in place, Frank, because that was already, a certain amount of that was already laid out prior to going to ballot. You know,
Basic,
that we-
but
yeah,
pavement management actually does a condition assessment of the roads, and it's an ongoing asset management program that ties in with GASB 34 accounting practices as well.
So like everything else, you need to have a plan to do that. You need to know what it consists of and what you think it's gonna cost.
Yeah, and we could piggyback on what the county does and things
Yeah,
like that.
so let's,
But
finance
I'd
committee
like
issues.
The road committee in the meantime, say, okay, if we have 400, here's where we're gonna be, we got part of that done. 800, 1.2, 1.5, and just come up with the list.
Mhm.
The funding will determine.
but I guess it's, what I'm looking at is the sustainable funding for the roads. Right, you know, it's,
It's a different,
so if it's a budget adjustment, then it's time to adjust the budget, and it just needs to get allocated, and not just taking the leftovers.
I hear what you're saying
Okay.
with that, but we do have money in the bank we can use towards it now. Maybe as a stopgap to what that goal is,
Okay.
without shutting everything down.
And I don't know how many of you saw my update where Representative Campbell's putting forth a proposition in front of the governor now. The governor says no new taxes, so it might not pass, but, Chris Bridges from Simpo was saying that, Karen Fan and Rusty Bowers are behind it. But even they have said it'll probably pass through both houses, but it's gonna get in front of the governor and he'll probably veto it. So,
If there's no objection, we'll put together a resolution from us to support that legislation. So possibly we might get some more money. But we went to when the governor was in town last week, Cecilia and I and Maggie went to the meeting, and he said, and who else went?
Cloyce.
Cloyce, yeah. And he said, no more taxes, but there's a lot of pressure being put on, so he could change his mind. So I think we need to support that. At least that may be a future resource.
Definitely not counting on it, so we gotta take care of our own house.
Right.
Yeah, but we also need to look at the other side.
If we can kick some back into, then great, but
yeah, I'm thinking
I'm not-
if anything, that might be a couple
not
years down
holding
the
the breath.
road.
Yeah. No, you don't.
And that would be her fund if it,
Right.
by some miracle, went through, and that's, in my
That's
opinion,
increasing the gas
the
tax.
proper way to do it.
But
But
it
every
hasn't worked
community
so
has
far.
something. I mean, there's huge, this is gonna be a big issue.
This will be a huge issue for the.
We'll bring a
governor.
resolution to the council.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? Road North 2 road maintenance, have we covered that?
Yep.
Yeah, come,
No?
No?
no. Okay, let's talk Road 2 North road maintenance.
Can you get me to 5B? Or, I guess I'll say, does council want to talk about widening Road 2 North? That's what I thought this was. Is that not it?
We have talked about that.
Okay, so we don't have to talk about it if that's,
You wanna talk about it now?
I think we just gotta figure it's a pipe dream.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't have
Okay.
any money.
all right.
No.
No one's spending money on
Consideration,
plans.
discussion regarding departmental initiatives for 2020-2021.
What's a departmental initiative?
It's what we wanna spend money on.
It's this, isn't it?
Departing mental.
Okay, so what I had asked is every department mostly for capital items to get those prepared for this meeting so that we could have a discussion regarding any possible capital items, although I think Joe's put most of them together after discussions with the departments and.
So this is sort of combining also the next agenda item, sort of.
Thank you.
Except that's too
I
big.
got two, yeah, that's what I got two.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, basically I just did a short little schedule by fund, so you got general fund, roads, water and sewer, of all the capital projects or when we budget, it's the big dollar things that every department looks at. Some departments, it might only be $5,000, depending on the department, other departments, it's $100,000. So this is really sort of getting into the weeds a little bit of the budget, but just some of the things that each department looks at. I put a column in here for this year's budget, the 1920 adopted budget, and an estimate of where we think the amount's gonna be. Now understand, I haven't met with every department, so this list can change once we see the projections. But some of the things that we've been looking at pretty hard is one in recreation. We've done a community center master plan, and that's basically decide what we want to do around the community center. So it has, and we're actually going to be bringing it to council as an information item, just so you can take a look at it and see what it is. But it basically takes the courts where the parks field is, and all around the community center where it's all gravel right now, plans for parking and all the amenities that we need. And whether we fund it over 3 years or 5 years, that the budget will decide. And it's a way that we sat down and we worked together, and we got it all drawn up, so we have just a plan of where we're gonna be and what we need to do out there. And we've been trying to take that approach with several other things, just to sit down and really look at it, instead of just doing, oh, let's put a fence here, or let's just do this one little project. Let's do it in a big plan so that we know this is step 1 or step 2 or step 3. Senior center, one of the things, new flooring, those bids came in pretty well, so we're actually gonna probably be able to paint the interior and do the flooring at the same time.
Paint first.
Yeah, and then the facilities, near the bottom of the first page, one of the areas that we have been working hard on is we know all of our buildings have HVAC issues. They're all getting pretty old, and we can't afford to replace them all tomorrow. So we're just trying to hit the worst building first. We're doing the same thing with the roof. We did the senior center as the emergency, and I'm recommending we defer the community center until next year. So we're coming up with that plan just to slowly maintain our buildings, put a little bit in each year, so it's just not a big expense.
Just to go back on that, the roofs in particular, all those roofs were put on about 20 years ago, so they're all hitting at the same time.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do what we can so that we don't have that happen in the future.
Yeah. The police department, one thing I did want to mention there is I'm budgeting for actually 3 vehicles next year, an admin vehicle and 2 police cars. But since we paid off our lease purchase, I'm just gonna plug in 2 police cars every year from here on out, and an admin vehicle. We did buy several admin vehicles this year. We know we're gonna want one for the building department, and that's what I know right now. There might be other needs that we might have too, so. And then the non-departmental, I just wanted to put in all the things. We have our $65,000 for outside agency funding, which is primarily the chamber. Our 50-year anniversary celebration, I did this for Mike Best, so we have an extra 10 sitting out there. We have an ADR water study. I left We're still continuing with our document management program project, which is digitizing everything. And you can see that it's gonna start dropping off after this year. We budget 500,000 in contingencies. Now, this year, we've pretty well exhausted our contingency funds, doing the senior center roof and all the other little projects. But that includes, and I'll talk to you about PSRS later, the $300,000 contribution to the PSPRS. And I only have 100,000 transferring to HERF. This is where if we decide to spend more of the general fund's money for the roads, this is where that will come through. In the roads budgets, as you can see, I have $400,000 right now plugged in for, we call it preservation maintenance and chip seal projects. We start breaking out chip seal, we might just roll that together, because they wanted to see how much we're doing on chip seal and how much we're doing on everything else, so we might combine, we'll see how it goes. And Frank, right
I'm
now.
not a big fan of chip seal for paving.
has asked for a crash trader message board at 20 that we didn't spend this year. And the water enterprise fund, really nothing, the contingencies, their building is the big number.
Can I go back to I'm gonna bring it up even though it's a sore subject. The roads building, September of '21, unless something changes, we're kicked out of the Quonset hut in the shop yard. So putting that building into 23, 24 means 2 years, we're gonna be homeless. So,
Move in over at the sewer plant.
okay.
We gotta do.
Big building,
I
big
thought we
building.
just approved the building last meeting.
It's utilities.
The treatment plant.
That's utilities.
It wasn't for the roads
Not for the
department.
roads.
We were gonna use that one as the template to build a roads building in the same general area.
And we know that the group's not really ready for that building, so.
Right, but we do have to negotiate that with them, so.
Yeah.
So either we need to change the lease or look at moving that building up.
Right, it might have come sooner.
That's the mobile home building, correct? And the Quonset.
Sewer.
In the Quonset, yeah.
And what are we using the Quonset hut for right now? Does anybody know?
Equipment storage, that we need the water truck, and half of it's utilities and half of it is roads. So the utilities building, they'll be moving out of there where we keep the Vector truck and things that need to keep from freezing. And the roads has water trucks that need to keep from freezing. So, well,
Don't we own
And
the
how
Quonset?
do they keep it from freezing, putting it in that Quonset hut?
I think there's heat in there, so. Well, that's the purpose of building the building.
Drain the water truck.
We can. So if council wants me to drain the water truck every night, we can drain the water truck every night.
Where's the Quonset?
That's what most
going?
contractors do every
I
day.
understand that, so we can do that, so.
Where's the Quonset hut building going? Who, what?
So when the equestrian group signed on, it was within a 5-year period that they were gonna take over the the Quonset hut and the mobile home that the roads department's in.
We did that?
You missed that?
We did that.
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
yep.
Oh, yeah.
What do they need
Oh,
Quonset
yeah.
for?
I don't know, it was something that Robert had negotiated with them that,
I think
I
we
don't
should
know.
talk to them. I think that could be extended.
well, I think it can be extended, cause I don't think they've got quite the legs that they were hoping to have by
No.
now, but,
All they've got is the arena, really, you know.
at some point
and a
they're-
tractor.
are looking forward to having it.
But their lease area goes all the way to Old Home Manor Drive, so all our stockpile areas, everything.
I think we need to talk to them and see if we can't push that back.
I just,
Would be the best bet.
Well,
I
we
put
need
it
a
on my
target
list.
date for that so we can get it done eventually.
40-47.
That's when Jack's not gonna be there. Right.
You got it, Jack.
cheapest thing would be to change the lease.
Yeah, do that. Like I said, water enterprise, nothing, no major projects have been presented to me yet. Sewer enterprise, we had 75,000 for collection cleaning. The idea there was just to do portions of our system every year, contracted out. I left 120 in for the drying beds, and another 75 for contingencies, and I know, I'm sure they're gonna propose other things, but the building this year was the big dollar. And then capital improvements, to understand, this money is 1% of our sales tax. It goes to the capital improvement fund, can be used for recreational programs, supporting the aquatic center, paying our debt service, supporting our police department. This is an area that it was done by resolution, and the council can change how these funds can be used. You have that option. So we could use part of that money for roads or any other choice, and we'd have to come back and do it through a resolution to change, what that 1% was allocated for. So just saying it's a viable alternative that we can do.
So 1% every year is how much, about?
Capital improvement, it's, I got too much in there, about 1.8 million. So, well, I'm gonna say 1.6, because there's some other funding in there also. We run our Yavapai drainage projects through there, and that's basically, we get about 130 a year, and we spend 130,000 a year. Sometimes it rolls over, but we keep that in a separate little bucket. I have another 135, really, you can see we're gonna, for the Old Home Manor Master Plan, we budgeted 250. It's gonna be about 265, as Mark said, and the consultant has broken it out. He's gonna spend about 130 between now and June, and then 135 next fiscal year. Let's see, next year, welcome to Chino Valley sign. I just put $100,000, thinking that that's when all the signage will be done. We have $75,000 for an impact fee study, and that's something we'll bring back probably after home rule and everything, if you guys even want to consider impact fees, if you want to continue that.
We're doing the impact fee?
No, it's,
we'll relook at it.
it's a placeholder,
Just in
Okay.
case.
just in case you guys want to do it. And I had 750 for the gas line rental manor. I'm thinking that would be spent next fiscal year. And then I put 250 in for the police department design, thinking that this preliminary phase is going to be around a $300,000 number, and we don't know what that is yet. We have met with the consultants, we have selected a consultant, and we are right now going to start negotiating what that price is to get that 30% preliminary design. So that number could be way off. It could be 150. It's going to be probably somewhere in there.
30 to 60 days probably?
Yeah, 30 to 60 days. So that'll be coming to council probably before the budget's adopted. And I threw 300,000 out to a future year if we decide to finalize the design on the building after 30%. The rest of it is we transfer 250 a year to the police department and 150,000 to help support the aquatic centers. So we're taking this money and basically putting it back in the general fund. And then our debt service next year is about $973,000 on it, which is consistent with what we've been doing every year. The other little bucket of money that we have about $300,000, and they called it the capital improvement fund. I sort of like to call it the asset replacement fund, so it's just a little separate fund. And what the town's policy says is this is like one-time found money. So it started with state comp refunds and insurance refunds and sales tax audit revenue. Well, with the law changes, we really don't have a sales tax audit program. We used to contract with an individual to actually go out and do individual audits. And so the revenues, it's really almost impossible for little towns, smaller towns to have an audit function because the Department of Revenue is really cranked down on what you can do and made it very, very difficult now for us to hire auditors. I think there's only one left in the state. So the only way we do it is, every major construction project that goes on, I track that sales tax on those projects. And if I see a contractor not paying, then I notify the Department of Revenue, and then any receipts we get from that, we go into this fund. So it's really for just one-time funds that we receive, and it's supposed to be used for asset replacement. So one year we bought a police car out of it, and I think this year we're outfitting one of a new police truck or a portion of it. So, but it's just a little emergency fund, and we just have a little bucket of money we have some. So again, I want to put a big asterisk preface this. I haven't met with the departments yet. That's the next few weeks, but pretty much these are the big capital things that we're doing.
Question. Yesterday I was driving down Willow Road and they had one of those signs that says 35 miles an hour. And then later I came out here and I almost got blown off the road by people going 55 out here.
I wasn't out.
Now,
I was home.
now, I don't know what those signs cost or what it costs to operate one, and I don't know how effective they are, but maybe it might
Simple.
consider.
That was a simple.
Randy knows.
Randy knows.
a state. So the signs that we have in the school zones, I actually just got a quote for the Governor's Office of Highway Safety grant. It's about with the beacon, with the sign with the flashing beacons on them, with the shipping and on sales tax, about $4,300 a sign.
Plus installation, which is in kind.
What do you think? If they'd be worth doing one of those and trying it? I don't know.
How many do we have in town?
We have 4 back over here by Del Rio and Heritage. We have 3 by Territorial, and we're gonna ask for 6 more this year.
Could you put it out on 89 to see if it worked?
We can't put any signs on 89.
That's all they do. Yeah.
You can ask
Put it
permission.
off the right of way.
Bless you.
Well, maybe you ought to ask ADA.
You can negotiate an off-site signage agreement with the landowner. See, that might work.
I just see the traffic, and I know you guys put those out there and things.
And we do have, so the ones that we have in the school zones are permanent. We do have 2 portable ones that when citizens complain that, hey, there's speeders at Porcupine Pass, we'll go put the signs out there for a few weeks. We get them back and then it collects all the data for that time. And you look at the data and it can actually prove or disprove if people are speeding and if they are speeding at what times.
You have to you can put one on 89?
We could talk to
We can
ADOT
talk
about
to
it.
ADOT.
Would you talk to ADOT, see it, and try it and see what it does?
Yeah, then if people are complaining of speeders, it helps us collect the data to see
Yeah.
what times we need to
If we
put
get that
officers
data
out there
and prove
to
that we're
catch
actually
them.
doing something.
We could
Especially
even
going
talk
to
to them
runs,
about
too.
permanent signage if we could get a permit.
Would you please do that? Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion?
Anybody department-wise have anything else for that isn't on here?
Any other discussion of capital projects?
Joe, do you want me to hand out preliminary on this, or do you want to wait?
It's totally up to you.
So along with the community center master plan picture that we gave out, Joe put together a 5-year plan for funding. So let me pass those out. Some kind of a priority needs of it. Drainage plan would be the first step, then a parking lot improvement for the first year. And then you can kind of see from there where it goes.
And you can use your map here to correlate.
Thank you, Ben.
And that was kind of it. We did have a committee together, did put a committee together to go over the master plan. As most of you know, the parking lot at the community center is pretty nil at this point, and at any given time for whether it's Little League or soccer or fireworks or whatever, the parking lot's used quite extensively, so it does need an overhaul.
This is a dirt parking lot? Or
Yes.
Right now it is.
Is that the
Yes.
plan?
No.
No. Frank.
I don't like their parking lots. They're dirty and dusty and bad for the environment.
I agree. I just wanted I didn't see paving.
Creates a rural atmosphere though.
That you are correct. No, we kind of mirrored it
Filled
off
with
of
tailgate
the
down at
aquatic
the
center
dumpster.
parking lot,
Okay.
like for like.
I understand.
So no, it's a plan to pave the parking lot.
So I really want to commend Cindy and Scott and their staff, and even Will and Josh.
Maybe Jim goes
They did spend a lot of time and a lot of effort with several good meetings and came to come up with this plan. So we just threw some numbers out, we're thinking it's about a $900,000 number, all said and done. Whether we do it in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, at least now when we spend the money over there, we'll know it's we're not gonna be dealing anything up when we spend it in 5 or 10 years.
And where's this money coming from?
It'll come out in the general fund if we do it, so.
It sort of reminds me of like the ball field lights and when we did that large project for Community Center Park, there were a lot of things that were, because of monetary issues, were stopped and things weren't completed. Although the community center was built before that, it's sort of, that whole area is an eyesore and it's unfinished. And much like the lights, and we could go back and look at even the conduit going to the over across the park and irrigation, it's unfinished. And they just stopped a lot of it. It's just like they reached a point where they had gotten the end of their budget or money, and that was it. It stopped. And so that's been, what, 2004, so it's been a while. We have 6. So it's been a while since, we're kind of coming back to this and kind of finishing it and completing it. And if you look at that area, dirty, dusty, and eyesore, it needs some attention. So, and it is the community center, and it is all that center park of Community Center Park.
So
That's why we're revisiting it. And if we can slowly do this a little bit through the years, then the financial impact shouldn't be too bad.
Scott, you guys have also talked about 2 things, the dog park and then the fields out at Old Home Manor. So,
Well,
it's too big of a thing to bite, or?
it is.
I think at the second in time, again, I think
Yes.
that we would prefer waiting to see exactly where Old Home Manor's going, to see if maybe getting a recreational facility in place out there could be part of the master plan, could be part of the entire program, rather than trying to just throw some numbers out there and getting 2 ball fields rehabbed.
We'd like to see that progress a little more, and then we can see how that's moving forward, and then we'll come up with a plan and bring it to mayor and council at that time, that in the future. As far as the dog park, we can make some minor improvements just to the existing facility. It's one of, personally, I receive one of the biggest complaints is that dog park. And so everyone brings them to Memory Park, and of course, if we've all seen our dog park, it does need a little attention. Now, I'm not a dog guy, I'm a cat guy, but Chino Valley is a dog community.
Call it a cat park.
Yeah. But with this community center master plan, it's just a gradual improvements through the years. And if we can't do some of them some year, we won't. It's that simple.
Road 2 North Utilities.
Do you even want to talk about it?
Update on public safety personal retirement, PSRPs, RPS or PS or?
PSPS.
PS, yeah.
So this is actually sort of positive in a way.
Oh. You get to pay your stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sure. I prepared a presentation.
Thank you.
So as you know, the town of Chino Valley, like numerous fire departments, municipalities, et cetera, throughout the state, the public safety retirement system is severely underfunded. And so we were actually getting worse and worse, our unfunded liability, and this is the amount that we have not funded, that we still, that someday, we're gonna have to pay the piper to come up with these funds. So the town is committed for the last 2 fiscal years, and actually we passed a resolution So anything we have left in contingencies that we continually fund by the end of the fiscal year, pay down this unfunded liability just a little bit. So in 17, we're at 2.5 million, and you can see in 18, it kept going up, and in fact, 19, it started going up. And this is based on their actuarial report, so it's actually a year behind. So then we started paying down the amount. And so you see the effect of two $300,000 payments, taking that unfunded from 3.64 down to 3.5, and now down to $3 million. So on the next page, and this is a little complicated in a little detail, but let me go through it, because if you understand it, you'll see why it's very advantageous for the community to continue to fund at that level. And like I've said several times, in 10 years, somebody's gonna look back and go, wow, those people there were pretty darn smart, they did a great job. So our total employer contribution in 17 was 25.79%. That means almost 26 cents of every dollar a police officer earns, the town pays in that amount for their retirement fund. And you can see it started growing to 33%, 35%, and the projections were that it would just continue to go up and up and up. So now we're at 30.82 after our first 300,000, and 30.27, which is the amount that we have for next budget year. So that has actually decreased the net change total about 1.78%. But if you go down to the near the bottom, about halfway down, it says annual employer cost. That's how much the town pays in retirement. So in 17, it was 309,000, 18, 433, 449, like the graph kept going up. And now with these extra $300,000 contributions, it's actually going down. And what that means is we're saving about $65,000 a year for every year we put 300,000. So our return on that $300,000 is $65,000, and it's gonna compound. So our rate's gonna decrease, the amount that we're putting in the PS plans for our current employer base is gonna decrease. And so it's really, in my mind, a very good return on investment to continue to fund this as really aggressively as we can. But we don't have to. And if we don't, our rate will just, our current rate for our current employees will just continue to grow. So, and I think 300,000, I mean, we have, a little over $3 million in unfunded liability. That means we'll have it paid off in 10 years. So I think it's just a smart investment that we keep doing.
Will be paid off in how many years? So what's our balance now?
In 10, about $3 million. That's our unfunded amount right now.
It's on the first.
And that's to get our
Okay.
system
On the second.
100% funded.
Okay.
Question?
So, and that'll change a little bit, but we might have to pay off in 8 years, because the liability might actually go down, depending on the employees we hire and the employees that leave within our system. So there's potential we could have a fully funded area. But at the current rate, current employees where we're at today, it's a 10-year plan to do it.
So Joe, when you say you think it's a good idea to keep doing it, but we don't really have to,
We don't have to, we're not required to.
but then what, then
Well-
you just keep going in debt?
Right.
So-
And there'll be a point where the town will actually have to come up and pay that.
Okay.
When the fund, when, I guess their individual fund goes zero, the town will have to fund it.
Right.
Is that how that works, Laura? I don't
And
know.
Prescott just passed that 1% sales tax, because they were way
Oh, yeah.
underfunded. And then.
There are some communities, sorry for interrupting, sir, that are paying over 100%.
Bisbee is pretty much.
So it's dollar for dollar.
Dollar for dollar. So actually, I hate to say this, but 29% is not too bad. It's expensive, because we pay about 12% for all the ASRS
Yeah,
employees.
and from a recruitment and retention perspective, I mean, it says a lot. It's a
Yeah.
big selling point for us.
Well, I'm all for continuing to do it, because in 10 years, I don't really care if they think we're very smart, but I really would like to have them think we were responsible.
Yes. Well, still think you're pretty smart.
I agree.
I agree. Okay, moving on. Thank you. Consideration discussion regarding strategic plan. Who's gonna do that?
I was asked to kind of head that off.
Good.
Yeah. So you get to listen to me talk some more, I guess. So
Hold it. Jack needs to go potty, so
It's all about Jack.
it's all about you. We'll take
Am I
5.
the only one?
take a half hour.
Laura,
Cindy,
All right.
you need
Who heard the meeting already?
I'm okay, I promise.
It woke me up, and I didn't know what it was, so I fell right back asleep. I thought it was
Promise,
Mike.
Maggie.
Did you see the trail of it?
No, I did,
called the
like I said,
crud,
it woke
officially.
me out of a
We're all
dead
just
sleep,
passing
because
it.
I had had a really bad night.
As long as you haven't been
And
to
I thought I heard
China.
somebody running
Stay
across
on.
the living room.
Interesting story.
I
really wanna know if you like.
I didn't even go outside.
My oldest son's best
Like
friend
right over my
is
house.
a teacher in
It
China.
was,
And
I went outside right after, and
since about 3 days before the
thunder
coronavirus
from it
We're on the
was hitting the mountains and was roaring for about 30 seconds. It roared.
I love that reverb. Yeah.
The strategic plan that you developed back then, last year, included 3 focus areas: infrastructure, water, and economic development. Well, this tells you exactly when, yeah, March 19th. All right, so it included some goals. The first was public works, economic development, and the extension of sewer and water at the Old Home Manor Business Park. Obviously, Frank can jump in to let me know. Has this been completed?
In process.
Or is this still in process?
It's in process.
It's a multi-year process.
Okay. So the next one was extension of sewer and or water to help promote economic development. That's pretty general. The next goal that you had was from Public Works, master plan for municipal facilities. The next one, develop economic development strategic plan for Old Home Manor Business Park. That's kind of,
Go back to 3 real quick. That's the community center master plan is part of number 3. If you're wondering why that was brought up. Go ahead.
In the police building.
In the police building.
okay.
Can we add that to that goal? Specifically what it's for?
The facilities planning.
Well,
Go ahead, Mayor.
Oh, that's a very general goal. Can we specifically identify what municipal facilities we're talking about with that goal?
I think we're looking at engineering for the police department is one of them,
Community center.
right?
And then what happens to this
North
campus down
campus.
here?
Yeah, North Campus, I think, would be the next biggest issue.
And we're accomplishing the building at the treatment plant.
Josh,
is all
are you
municipal.
catching this so we can
Yeah.
update that?
Yeah. Yep, I'll get it. One of the things I wanted to do is go through the goals that you had last year and then maybe revisit them, because I think maybe we need to put some timeframes on them and list them as short-term, medium, or long-term goals, and then maybe either come up with a few objectives with regards to those, or even implementation strategies. So it's more than just a
A bullet point.
general goal, right? So if we can kind of build on these goals, maybe make them a little bit more specific instead of generic, and then create some sort of implementation strategy after we've listed them as short, medium, or long term. So number 4 was develop economic development strategic plan for Old Home Manor Business Park. That's still, we're still working on that.
So, because I'm doing a comprehensive economic development strategy plan, Josh made the recommendation to me to just incorporate Old Home Manor strategic plan within that document. I've gotten a lot of headway into it, a lot actually, about 14 pages. So, getting ready to, once I kind of get some more bullet points underneath my focus areas, get with Josh if he can help me.
When do you expect to have that completed?
Well, You also have an economic development meeting lined up in March.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it won't be complete
And-
until it's bounced off you guys.
Okay, so.
Yes.
So it-
bring
it
I'll
need-
have a first draft of it for you there.
Okay.
We'll come to, okay, good.
Are you taking individual chapters to them first, or how, or
What do you think? Maybe just like the Old Home Manor portion first? Or?
I'd break it up into pieces.
Okay.
That's what I would do. Otherwise, it's a lot to eat.
Okay.
So what are you saying?
I would say when she brings it to you, that she brings just a couple chapters at a time. That way you're not digesting the entire document, but she can kind of piecemeal it to you, and then that way it's you can cover more of one chapter in your given time and just have multiple meetings.
Okay.
That's
It's kind of stay on topic kind of thing, so we can spend enough time on each topic.
You're talking 14 pages, that's a lot for someone time.
well, how many
It'll be
chapters
longer
is
than that. That's only with my getting through just not even Old Home Manor. That's not with the other 5 focus areas that I have to write about. So it's going to be a little longer than that. Probably double, maybe.
And I would like to see Old Home Manor in one of the leading deals.
Okay.
Because I think the whole management of that, because of how we're moving on out there, that would be more of a priority. And then maybe an overview of the other 10, and then maybe we could decide at that meeting what priority to bring the balance of it in. Is that,
Sure.
without saying the format, I'm not sure.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Is that good?
Yeah. Right.
So the next goal that you had listed was inventory of town wells, production levels. Number 6 was analysis of development agreements. Some of these are pretty general, so I think we need to kind of beef up the language so that people know exactly what's being talked about, and then we can create more specific objectives and implementation strategies. Number 7 was economic development strategic plan exclusive of the business park, so I guess this is the other portion of the strategic plan, not Old Home Manor. And then rewrite of the town's exclusive of.
So that is part of the sets that I'm working on. That's one of the focus areas is exclusive part of the business park.
That's good.
Don't forget to come. I see it. Maybe it was, I thought there was red in there. Yeah.
Cecilia, are we staying
The whole
here?
big hair thing on your.
You can stay here.
Yeah.
There's leadership, you guys stick around for a minute so we can get the.